Chapter 571. Zhang Yichen was indeed very drunk. His eyes were closed. The excessive alcohol and the fact that he hadn't drunk like this for a long time put him in an extremely uncomfortable state. Hui Yangxiu had come up to see him. She was touched when she saw Hu Jinmiao taking care of him. She was old and had flown to Rong City early that morning. Hu Jinmiao told her to go back to her room and rest. He could take care of Zhang Yichen. Hu Jinmiao didn't think much of it when Xia brought the soup over. He called Zhang Yichen's name in a low voice. Seeing that Zhang Yichen didn't respond, he helped him up and let him drink. Su Peijian just wanted to make sure that Zhang Yichen drank all the soup. She didn't need to care about what happened next. She saw Zhang Yichen drink the soup to dispel the hangover. Su Peijian had only heard about this kind of thing before, but she had never tried it herself. She wouldn't try it, so she didn't know how effective it was. When Xiao Xia came out after delivering the soup, Su Peijian was nowhere to be seen. The room was quiet. Hu Jinmiao stood next to Zhang Yichen and looked at him. His slightly narrowed eyes were a little worried and a little curious. Did Zhang Yichen have a misunderstanding about Su Qingsang, or the person sleeping on the bed didn't respond? Hu Jinmiao stared at him for a while and was about to leave. Zhang Yichen, who was lying on the bed, opened his eyes. "Uncle? How are you?" Zhang Yichen had drunk the wine. In his half-awake state, he felt that he saw Su Qingsang. The word uncle was very soft, but it sounded familiar. He had heard it somewhere before. He tried to open his eyes to see clearly, but the alcohol and the drug stimulated the deepest desire in his heart. Qingsang? Hu Jinmiao was stunned by the two simple words. He stared at Zhang Yichen's face and spoke very softly. "Uncle, what did you call me?" His voice was too soft to be heard clearly. Zhang Yichen felt that the voice came from far away, but it also seemed to be very close. He was drugged. Although it wasn't an aphrodisiac, the one Su Peijian chose for him could arouse the deepest desire in his heart. He blinked, trying to see the person in front of him clearly, but he couldn't. Hu Jinmiao took a step forward and stood by the bed. He stared at Zhang Yichen's face, his facial features becoming more and more profound. "Uncle, who are you calling?" "Qingsang." Normally, no amount of alcohol would make Zhang Yichen lose his composure. But now, the desire in his heart had reached an uncontrollable level. He suddenly reached out and grabbed Hu Jinmiao's wrist. His movement was so sudden that Hu Jinmiao was caught off guard. She fell against Zhang Yichen's body. Zhang Yichen hugged Hu Jinmiao tightly. With the help of the drug, he couldn't even tell that the person in front of him wasn't Su Qingsang. Qingsang, Qingsang. The emotions that he had been suppressing were now completely released under the effects of alcohol and drugs. Even so, Zhang Yichen still cared about their identities. He didn't say anything else to Su Qingsang. Hu Jinmiao couldn't move. His speculation had become a reality. With great difficulty, he propped himself up and stared at Zhang Yichen, who was bewildered and confused. "You like Qingsang?" He couldn't like her. He couldn't like her. In the end, Zhang Yichen nodded. "Yes. Qingsang, I like you." She was so special and so smart. He didn't feel it the first time they met, but he felt it again and again. In fact, he didn't spend much time with her. But because of that, he couldn't forget her. "Qingsang, Qingsang. I like you." He hugged Hu Jinmiao and whispered how much he missed him. But that was all. His strong willpower was in conflict with his inner feelings. Even if what he was seeing was just an illusion, he didn't want to and couldn't do more to Su Qingsang. The others didn't understand, but Hu Jinmiao did. He restrained himself. Even when he was hugging him, he controlled his strength. He couldn't help but move away from his arms. He was strong, and Zhang Yichen was drunk at the moment, so he easily moved away from Zhang Yichen's arms. Sitting on the edge of the bed, he looked at Zhang Yichen, who was reaching for her again. He suddenly leaned forward. Uncle. I'm married. Have you forgotten? He didn't feel anger or hatred. He understood Su Qingsang's charm. Any man who spent time with Su Qingsang would find her good side. Zhang Yichen found it too. It was normal. Married? Zhang Yichen was confused. The Su Qingsang in front of him seemed more and more unreal. For a moment, he thought he was looking at Hu Jinyao. How could it be Hu Jinyao? He grabbed Su Qingsang's hand. He looked like he was in pain. I know you're married. I know. His voice was hoarse and incoherent, and he sounded like he was in deep pain. He knew that she was married, and her husband was his nephew. That was why he had been trying so hard to suppress it. Why? Why did he fall in love with his nephew's woman? Why? Why are you married? Why? Wasn't I the one who met you first? Zhang Yichen's voice was filled with pain. The greatest pain was not being able to get what one wanted. Qingsang. Qingsang. Hu Jinyao looked at Zhang Yichen's face, and Zhang Yichen looked back at him. The drug was starting to take effect. The hallucination in front of Zhang Yichen became more and more obvious. To his surprise, he saw Su Qingsang staring at him with a gentle face. Qingsang, 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 if I were the one you met first, would you like me? He reached out and hugged her again. Tell me, would you like me too? Would you? He couldn't forget the first time they met. They stood in the corridor of the hospital. She raised her eyebrows and looked at him with a faint smile on her face. She was so smart. She could tell at a glance that the woman was there to blackmail him. He couldn't forget the time when he was discussing things with Crew Cut. He thought he had hidden well. However, Su Qingsang happened to bump into him. She was scared, but she pretended to be calm. She wouldn't beg for mercy. He hadn't seen her much, but he was amazed at the first sight, fell in love with her the second, and fell in love with her the third. He still remembered how relaxed and happy she was when she was with Hu Jinyao. The more he remembered, the more he restrained himself. He knew it was impossible, so he tried his best to suppress it. But those thoughts kept rolling around in his mind in his dreams at night. He always suppressed himself during the day, but he couldn't help but think of Su Qingsang at night. The situation in front of him was different from the dream. The deepest desire in his heart was aroused. He thought that what he saw was an illusion. It was the figure in his dream. He couldn't help but ask the question he had wanted to ask the most. Qingsang, Qingsang, if I were the one you met first, would you like me? He stared at the Su Qingsang in front of him, insisting on an answer. Hu Jinyao knew that Zhang Yichen was drunk and not sober, but the truth came out of his mouth. The reason why he said that was because he already had such thoughts in his mind. Uncle. He heard his wife's name coming from another man's mouth over and over again. And this man was his uncle. Hu Jinyao wasn't in a good mood. His face was a little gloomy. Qingsang is married. He reminded him again that no matter what thoughts he had in his mind, he should throw them away and destroy them completely. Immersed in the illusion, Zhang Yichen didn't realize that it wasn't Su Qingsang who said that. He only heard Su Qingsang say that she was married. He suddenly hugged him again. I know you are married. Zhang Yichen's voice was filled with pain and bitterness. He hugged Su Qingsang tightly, unwilling to let go. I just regret that I wasn't the one who met you first. Even if I met you, Qingsang might not fall in love with you. Why? Zhang Yichen looked at the illusion in front of him. Why don't you love me? Last time, when I was about to kiss you, you blushed. It wasn't a real kiss. He was just trying to intimidate her by getting close to her. But Hu Jinyao didn't know that. He only heard that Zhang Yichen kissed Su Qingsang. Last time? When was the last time? Why didn't Su Qingsang mention it to him? Hu Jinyao was still recalling every time Su Qingsang mentioned Zhang Yichen in front of him, but Zhang Yichen started again. Since you blushed at that time, Does it mean that if I had the chance, you might fall in love with me too? The words reeked of alcohol, but he wasn't sure. All Zhang Yichen wanted was a little comfort in his dreams. However, he didn't know that the person in front of him wasn't Su Qingsang. He was only a teenager at that time, but Zhang Yichen trained him like an adult. However, the effect was also very direct. He was very tired every day, extremely tired. As a result, he slept like a log at night. He didn't even have a dream, let alone a nightmare. Zhang Yichen was only a few years older than him. However, he told himself, a man's growth doesn't depend on what he has lost. It depends on what he has endured. He told himself that as a man, he shouldn't keep thinking about the past. No matter what, he had to move on. He knew that even without Zhang Yichen's encouragement, he could move on. However, because of Zhang Yichen's existence, he got rid of those nightmares earlier. Later, he had nightmares occasionally, but most of the time, those nightmares didn't bother him anymore. Obviously, there was something wrong with him. Su Qingsang looked at him sideways and couldn't help but ask her question. What's wrong? Did you have an argument with uncle? Hua Jinmiao glanced at her. Her eyes were clear and calm, without any hint of flirtation. He was sure that Zhang Yichen's feelings must be one-sided. Su Qingsang's personality meant that she would never cheat in a marriage. It wasn't her personality, nor was it her style. However, what if the person she had met was Zhang Yichen? Would she still have made the same choice? Would she have fallen in love with Zhang Yichen? After all, even he couldn't deny that Zhang Yichen was outstanding. Honey. Yes? You. If you hadn't married me, would you have fallen in love with another man? Hua Jinmiao couldn't ask the rest of the question when he met Su Qingsang's clear eyes. He shook his head and hugged her tightly again. I'm fine. I just feel a little tired. He must be crazy to doubt Su Qingsang because of a drunkard's words. Zhang Yichen was drunk. Whatever he said didn't count. More importantly, he trusted Su Qingsang. He didn't want to mention Zhang Yichen anymore. He didn't want Zhang Yichen to show his existence in front of Su Qingsang. He didn't answer her question, so Su Qingsang didn't ask anymore. Her attention was diverted. If you're tired, you can rest for a while. Su Qingsang glanced at the time. It was still early for dinner anyway. You rest. I'll read. Hua Jinmiao shook his head, hugged her tightly, and lay on the bed with her. You sleep with me. He held her in his arms and didn't do anything else. He rested his chin on the top of her head. He had decided to trust Su Qingsang, but he couldn't help but think of what Zhang Yichen said. He said that he had kissed Su Qingsang. Hui Yifan watched Su Peijian walk into the room. She had a smile on her face. That smile was full of calculation. Who did you give the medicine to? Su Peijian had said that she would take full responsibility for this, so he didn't ask. You're not going to give it to Su Qingsang, are you? Hua Jinmiao might kill you. Who said I was giving it to Su Qingsang? I gave it to someone else. Someone else? Where did that come from? Don't ask. Anyway, I believe that what I did today will be of great help to both of us. Did you give that medicine to Hua Jinmiao? I told you not to ask. Why are you still asking? Su Peijian sat on his lap and put her arms around his neck. Don't worry. Naturally, I will use it on the right person. Hui Yifan pulled her waist to his side and pinched her chin with his other hand. You're smiling like a fox. I don't believe you didn't do anything. But in this mansion, who else can make you use it? Su Peijian lowered her head and gently bit his finger. She blinked and looked at him with a seductive look. I didn't plan to do anything to Su Qingsang and Hua Jinmiao today. She was only planning to plant a seed of doubt. Zhang Yichen was drunk and drugged. He would definitely lose his composure. Looking at the photo and the look in his eyes, Su Qingsang could tell that he was trying to control himself. She wouldn't mind if she didn't have a chance to have sex with a man like that. Once he had the chance, the more he tried to control himself, the harder it would be to control himself. Once Zhang Yichen lost his composure, the seed of doubt would be planted in Hua Jinyao's heart. Hua Jinyao might not suspect Su Qingsang at the beginning, nor would he do anything to her at the beginning. But what if the seed grew bigger and bigger? What if the seed grew into a big tree and Hua Jinyao saw it? Would he still be able to stay calm then? Su Peijian gently brushed her lips against Hua Yifan's finger and turned her head to look at him. Don't worry. We're about to have a good show. Hua Yifan didn't like Su Peijian hiding everything from him. He gripped her chin and scanned her face with his sharp eyes. Woman, are you hiding something from me? Yes. Su Peijian didn't deny it at all. Everyone has secrets. I just don't want to tell you right now. Can't I? Hua Yifan narrowed his eyes and suddenly turned over, pressing Su Peijian under his body. Okay. But since you don't want to tell me your secret, I have to find out about it. Then I'll have to find out about your other secrets. Su Peijian smiled. She lifted her legs and hooked them around his waist. She cooperated with him. Lu Tongjia was very busy today as the hostess of the Hua family. She had too many things to deal with. She had to take care of all the guests and settle them down. She also had to talk to some of her cousins who rarely came. She sent them back to their rooms to rest. She was busy just now and didn't have time to talk to Su Peijian. She wanted to show off in front of old Master Hua, so she let her be. When she was done, she suddenly thought of Su Peijian. Didn't that woman just say that she would help her? Where did she go? She called Xiao Xia and asked her. She sneered inwardly. She really had to give up on Su Peijian. She called her help by serving a hangover soup. Lu Tongjia really didn't like Su Peijian's opportunism. Not to mention working with Su Peijian. It was true that she didn't like Su Qingsang, but her mind was very clear. She waved her hand and asked Xiao Xia to get to work. She seemed to suddenly think of something. Xiao Jiang. Zhang Yichen, he seems to have drunk a lot. Did you send him some hangover soup? I did. I sent it with Miss Su. Young Master Hua is taking care of him in his room. Hua Jinyao was taking care of Zhang Yichen in his room? Lu Tongjia suddenly felt a little suffocated when she thought of the photos Xiao Jiang had taken. She waved her hand and asked Xiao Xia to leave. Everyone had been arranged. For those who didn't want to sleep, there were different functional rooms in the Hua family for them to move around. She looked upstairs and finally made a turn in the corridor, planning to go to Zhang Yichen's room. But she didn't expect that when she walked over. The guest room was empty. There was no one in it. She immediately called Xiao Xia and asked where Zhang Yichen was. Xiao Xia only said that young Master Hua was taking care of Zhang Yichen, but she didn't say which room he was in. Hearing Lu Tongjia's question, she thought she was worried about Hua Jinyao. She told Lu Tongjia that Zhang Yichen was in the room next to Hua Jinyao's. Lu Tongjia's face became more and more gloomy. She naturally wouldn't think that this was Hua Jinyao's habit. She thought that it must be Su Qingsang's idea. She put her husband in the room next to her own. That was enough. Hua Jinyao was still there. How could Su Qingsang be so shameless? She was angry. Without thinking, she went upstairs to Hua Jinyao's room. She almost had the urge to tell Hua Jinyao about Zhang Yichen and Su Qingsang's dirty things. However, when she walked to Zhang Yichen's room, before she could open the door, she saw Su Qingsang rush out of the room. Her clothes were a little messy. Her hair was also messy. When she saw Lu Tongjia, Su Qingsang was stunned for a moment, then her face instantly turned red. Lu Tongjia's expression changed when she saw Su Qingsang's guilty look. She took a step forward and stared at Su Qingsang's face. She still remembered what Xiao Xia said. Hua Jinyao was taking care of Zhang Yichen in the room. Was that Hua Jinyao in the room? But what was Zhang Yichen doing? Wasn't Zhang Yichen in the room too? Auntie. Su Qingsang nodded and was about to go to her room next door. However, Lu Tongjia blocked her way. She glanced into the room. What was going on? Where is Hua Jinyao? Where is he? He's in the room, Su Qingsang said quickly. She walked around Lu Tongjia and was about to leave. Chapter 572. Su Qingsang's attitude made Lu Tongjia even more certain that there was something wrong with Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang, you. Before she could finish her sentence, she saw Zhang Yichen, who was also disheveled, open the door. When he saw Su Qingsang, he held her in his arms. Su Qingsang's whole body froze. She was being held by another man in front of her mother-in-law. And this man was Hua Jinyao's uncle? It couldn't get any more embarrassing. She struggled, trying to get Zhang Yichen to let go of her. However, Zhang Yichen was so strong that she didn't have a chance. Lu Tongjia's face turned green when she saw what was happening. You, what are you doing? You. Auntie, it's not what you think. Su Qingsang was so embarrassed. She didn't understand how things had turned out like this. Hua Jinyao said he was going to sleep, and he really fell asleep with her in his arms. The problem was that she didn't want to sleep today. Not only did she not want to sleep, but she was also very energetic. After Hua Jinyao fell asleep, she picked up her professional book and continued reading. However, her phone rang after a short while. It was Shi Mengwan. Su Qingsang didn't think much about it because she didn't want to wake Hua Jinyao up. She walked out of the room with her phone and stood at the end of the corridor. It was the study, and there was no one there. It was a good place for her to talk to Shi Mengwan. She could feel that Shi Mengwan was in a bad mood. In fact, Shi Mengwan was in a bad mood. She had gone to France to participate in the local design competition. After the preliminary round, she had participated in the semi-finals. She had the greatest hope of making it to the finals. Even if Shi Mengwan couldn't win a place in the final, it was an affirmation of her ability to participate in the competition. Shi Mengwan was still very young. She was already very happy that she had made it this far. However, extreme joy turned to sorrow. She didn't expect that she would be successful in her career, but frustrated in her love life. Ever since she accidentally got involved with Zhang Haoze, she knew that Chen Feifei was with Zhang Haoze. She tried her best to resist. She didn't want to be a mistress. However, she couldn't escape the desire in her heart, nor could she escape the desire to make Zhang Haoze think of her. Coincidentally, she had a relationship with Zhang Haoze. She hadn't figured out where to go with this relationship. She wanted to take the opportunity of going to France to think about it. However, she didn't expect that when she went to France, she would see the news of Zhang Haoze and Chen Feifei's engagement in the local media in Lin City. At that moment, she almost wanted to abandon the French competition and fly back home. She wanted to ask Zhang Haoze personally. Why was he doing this to her? She wanted to ask him, if the person he wanted to marry was Chen Feifei, then what was she? If he was just playing with her, why wouldn't he let her go? But in the end, he couldn't bring himself to ask those questions. Because she couldn't contact him at all. At first, he just didn't pick up her calls. Later, his phone was turned off. Shi Mengwan lowered her head. She couldn't tell what she was feeling, but she felt uncomfortable. He had no one to talk to about this kind of discomfort, let alone to his own family. After thinking about it for a long time, she could only call Su Qingsang to confide in her, even though she hadn't slept all night. Su Qingsang picked up Shi Mengwan's call and sensed something unusual in her tone. She took the phone to the study to answer the call. Shi Mengwan was about to say something, but she couldn't say it. Even if it was her best friend, she couldn't say that she had become someone else's mistress. Moreover, she had been willing to be a mistress from the beginning. Seriously speaking, what right did she have to criticize Zhang Haoze? Shi Mengwan didn't know where to tell Su Qingsang what was on her mind. She only told Su Qingsang some happy things in France. Su Qingsang sensed that something was wrong. She asked again and again, but Shi Mengwan only said that she was too tired from the competition. She didn't mention a word about Zhang Haoze. Su Qingsang couldn't find out the reason, so she could only give up. She hung up and was about to go back when Su Yusen called her again. Today was the Dragon Boat Festival, so she couldn't go back to Lin City for the festival. Su Yusen and Li Qianxue both missed her very much. She hadn't reached her room yet. Because she answered the phone, she stopped for a moment. She didn't know that Zhang Yichen was drugged and was sleeping in the room next door. Hua Jinyao was angry just now, so he left in a hurry and didn't close the door. Su Qingsang's voice wasn't loud, but who was Zhang Yichen? He was a soldier, so his hearing was quite good. More importantly, he was drugged. Anyone's voice sounded like Su Qingsang's voice to him. Previously, Hua Jinyao's knife hand strike had knocked him out for just a moment. His well-trained body made him wake up in the shortest time possible. Although he was awake, he wasn't completely awake. Alcohol and drugs, plus Hua Jinyao's chop just now. He was more and more immersed in his own hallucination. At that moment, he heard Su Qingsang's voice. He stood up and walked out of the door, wanting to hear more clearly. The door opened. Su Qingsang was standing at the door, talking on the phone. As soon as she hung up the phone with Su Yusen, Zhang Yichen put his arms around her waist. Su Qingsang was caught off guard by someone hugging her from behind. She was startled. She was already at the door of the room. At first, she thought it was a prank by Hua Jinyao. Jinyao. What are you doing? They were in the hallway. Before she could finish, Hua Jinyao had already put his arms around her waist and brought her back to the room. Su Qingsang realized something was wrong almost as soon as she entered the room. The person behind her wasn't Hua Jinyao. If it wasn't Hua Jinyao, then who was it? She struggled, but her body was held down by Zhang Yichen. He mumbled something, but Su Qingsang didn't hear it clearly. In fact, Zhang Yichen was calling her name. But Su Qingsang didn't hear it clearly. She only heard Zhang Yichen's voice. She didn't need to hear to know that this room belonged to Zhang Yichen. He was drunk. That was Su Qingsang's first reaction. After realizing that, she forced herself to calm down. Uncle, you're drunk. Let me go. Zhang Yichen held her tightly. The hallucination in front of him became real. He turned her body around. Suddenly, Su Qingsang made eye contact with Zhang Yichen. She was startled by him. What a pair of red eyes. They were very red. Asterisk uncle? Asterisk Zhang Yichen's breath reeked of alcohol. Su Qingsang turned her face away uncomfortably. She didn't think too much about it. She just thought that Zhang Yichen was drunk. Zhang Yichen stared at the hallucination in front of him. His mind was blank and confused. His reason and his desire were fighting in his heart. The fragrance of the person in his arms was so real. It was so real that he almost thought that it wasn't an illusion. But even if it was an illusion, he didn't want to. Because it was an offense. Zhang Yichen fought with himself. In the end, he could only hold the person in his arms tightly. He thought that it was an illusion. But it didn't work. Instead, the smell made him more and more tempted. Su Qingsang. Those two words flashed through his mind again. He couldn't say it out loud. He could only murmur it to himself. Su Qingsang couldn't hear it clearly. She didn't want to hear it clearly. Uncle, let me go. Zhang Yichen lowered his head, wanting to take a deep breath of her scent. Su Qingsang was startled. Without any hesitation, she raised her foot and kicked Zhang Yichen's calf. If it were any other time, she wouldn't have been able to do that. But today, Zhang Yichen was drugged. He was obviously out of his mind. He had also tried his best to protect her, which allowed Su Qingsang to escape from his arms. Su Qingsang had been hugged and pressed against by Zhang Yichen. Her hair was messy, and her clothes weren't as tidy as before. However, she didn't expect to run into Lu Tongjia as soon as she went out. The situation made her feel so embarrassed that she wanted to die. She didn't have time to explain to Lu Tongjia. Zhang Yichen, who was behind her, rushed out and hugged her again. Lu Tongjia's face turned completely green. She pointed at the two of them, her face livid. Lu Tongjia glared at Su Qingsang. She wanted to burn a hole in Su Qingsang's body with her eyes. What are you doing? Lu Tongjia's face darkened. If her eyes were solid, Su Qingsang would have been crushed into powder. Auntie, it's not what you think. Uncle is drunk. Drunk? Lu Tongjia was so angry that she laughed. What a shameless couple. You've done such a shameless thing, and you're trying to cover it up. What? Do you think everyone else is stupid? His words were a little harsh, but Su Qingsang couldn't care less now. She struggled, trying to make Zhang Yichen let go of her. However, Zhang Yichen's strength wasn't something she could fight back against. Lu Tongjia's whole body trembled. She pointed at Su Qingsang, feeling very angry. How dare you? This was really going against the heavens. How can you be so shameless? Don't you have any shame? Su Qingsang, don't forget who you are. Of course, Su Qingsang wouldn't forget who she was. She also felt embarrassed. But she didn't want the situation to be like this. Auntie, please do me a favor. It's really not what you think. Uncle is drunk. Hua Jinyao walked out of the room as soon as she finished speaking. He had been sleeping, but was woken up by the sudden noise. Hearing Lu Tongjia's suppressed voice, he walked out. He didn't expect to see the scene in front of him. Jinyao? Su Qingsang's face was full of surprise when she saw him. You're here. Come and help me pull uncle away. He's drunk. Hua Jinyao glanced at Su Qingsang, then looked at Zhang Yichen, who was holding her tightly. Drunk? Ha! Was he drunk, or was he pretending to be drunk to take advantage of her? Thinking of how Zhang Yichen had mistaken him for Su Qingsang, he couldn't help but feel angry. He took a few steps forward and pulled Su Qingsang away from Zhang Yichen's arms. Without hesitation, he punched Zhang Yichen's cheek. Zhang Yichen didn't wake up after being punched. He stood there and looked at Hua Jinyao, who was in front of him. Without thinking, he hugged him. Hua Jinyao was angry. He raised his hand and punched him again. Zhang Yichen took 2 punches in a row, but he didn't wake up. Instead, he walked towards Hua Jinyao. Su Qingsang had just escaped from Zhang Yichen's hands. She was still in shock. Meeting Lu Tongjia's eyes, she wanted to explain, but she knew that Lu Tongjia had already made up her mind. Lu Tongjia could see it with her own eyes, so Lu Tongjia wouldn't listen to her. She didn't want to explain to Lu Tongjia. As long as Hua Jinyao believed her, that was enough. She didn't know how Zhang Yichen became like this. She turned to look at Zhang Yichen. He was drunk, probably because he was drunk. However, when she saw Zhang Yichen stubbornly holding on to Hua Jinyao after Hua Jinyao punched him a few times, she began to feel that something was wrong. She was a doctor, even though she majored in obstetrics and gynecology. However, Zhang Yichen didn't look like he was drunk. Seeing that his face was red and he still wanted to hold on to Hua Jinyao, she suddenly stepped forward. Jinyao, wait. Stop hitting him. She was pleading for Zhang Yichen. Hua Jinyao's face darkened. He almost wanted to punch Zhang Yichen a few more times. Jinyao. There's something wrong with your uncle. She stepped forward and grabbed Hua Jinyao. See if you can restrain him. I'll check on him. Hua Jinyao looked at Su Qingsang. Her face was serious, and she didn't look like she was joking. He looked at Zhang Yichen. He seemed to realize that something was wrong with Zhang Yichen. He stepped forward and knocked Zhang Yichen out with a karate chop. Zhang Yichen was hit a few times, and this time, he passed out completely. Hua Jinyao caught Zhang Yichen's body and put him back in the room. Su Qingsang followed him in and opened Zhang Yichen's eyes immediately. His pupils were dilated unnaturally, and he seemed to be on a rampage. Maybe it was because of the alcohol, but she also knew that there could be another reason. She had seen a pregnant woman before. That woman was pregnant, but she didn't know that she was pregnant. Someone gave her a drink, and she drank it. Later, she found out that the drink had been spiked with hallucinogens. Hallucinogens, ecstasy pills, and other drugs could sometimes cause a reaction similar to that caused by alcohol. Inexperienced doctors wouldn't be able to tell. I suspect that he drank something he shouldn't have. Su Qingsang had only suspected it, but now she could basically confirm it. She looked up at Hua Jinyao and said, "Jinyao, I need a doctor in this field. I want to take a blood test for him." Hua Jinyao looked at Su Qingsang and thought of Zhang Yichen's usual behavior. He had always been calm and rational, almost to the point of restraint. Today was indeed a little strange. He nodded and called the doctor. There were so many guests in the Hua family, so it wasn't a good time to send Zhang Yichen to the hospital. Lu Tongjia came in as well. She looked at the two people in front of her and sneered. "Su Qingsang, don't try to confuse us. It's obvious that you two are in cahoots. You're talking nonsense to cover your tracks. I'm telling you, it's useless." Su Qingsang glanced at Lu Tongjia and didn't pay much attention to her. She looked at Hua Jinyao with expectation. As long as he believed in her, that was enough. She didn't need the whole world to agree with her. Hua Jinyao stepped forward and held her hand. He looked at Zhang Yichen, who was lying on the bed. He started to have the same worries as Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang tightened her grip on his hand. Although she looked calm, she was still afraid that Hua Jinyao would misunderstand her. "I believe in you." Hua Jinyao's simple words sounded powerful and resonant. Su Qingsang smiled and held Hua Jinyao's hand with both hands. The scene in front of her eyes was so dazzling. Lu Tongjia almost couldn't stand it anymore. "Good, very good indeed. I know that I have a loving son, but I didn't expect you to be so loving." She looked back and forth between Hua Jinyao and Su Qingsang, then finally looked at Hua Jinyao. "Hua Jinyao, you're a grown man and married. Can you not be so naive? This woman has no feelings for you at all. To put it bluntly, she's just using you. She can hook up with Zhang Yichen behind your back today. Tomorrow, she can hook up with another man behind your back. Things are so clear now. It's completely in front of you. You still don't believe me? What? Do you want to wait until the day you catch her in bed with your own eyes to believe it?" Su Qingsang's lips moved and she was about to retort because her words were really unpleasant to the ear. Hua Jinyao squeezed her hand. He turned to face Lu Tongjia, his eyes deep and firm. "Mom, you don't have to say that. I believe Qingsang. I believe in her character. I also believe in Uncle's character. They won't do what you said." "Good, good, good. It's really good. So I'm the bad guy now, am I? I didn't mean that. What I mean is, everything can wait for the doctor to come and examine Uncle first before we talk about it." "Check. What can you guys find out?" "He just drank a little. People say that wine tells the truth. Pretending to be crazy under the influence of alcohol. But isn't that what he really thinks? The two of them are already flirting and cuddling right in front of you right now. Then, when you are not around, have you ever thought that there will be more disgusting scenes when you are not around?" "Mom. Auntie." Su Qingsang and Hua Jinyao couldn't listen to it anymore. They looked at Lu Tongjia together, and their expressions were equally ugly. The difference was that Hua Jinyao looked indignant, while Su Qingsang looked anxious. No matter how much she didn't care about Lu Tongjia's attitude, she couldn't let her continue after what she said today. "What? Do you think I said it badly? Hua Jinyao, if you're really a man, you should divorce her. Let me tell you, a woman can be incompetent and not beautiful. But at the very least, she must be loyal to her husband. Did she? Mom, don't talk nonsense. Qing Sang isn't that kind of person. Auntie, I know you don't like me, but please be kind with your words. Be kind with my words? Su Qing Sang, what right do you have to ask me to be kind with my words? What's wrong? You dare to do it but don't dare to admit it, right? You can do it, but you're afraid of others saying it? Auntie, I think I'm innocent. I didn't do what you said. Mom, I'm also willing to believe in Qing Sang's innocence. She's not that kind of woman. Lu Tongjia was angered by their gazes and nodded with hatred. Okay. You and your wife are united, but I seem to be meddlesome. Hua Jinyao, I'll wait and see you regret it. After saying this, she didn't look at Hua Jinyao at all. She glared at Su Qing Sang, then turned around and went back to her room with a dissatisfied look. After she left, Su Qingsang's shoulders unconsciously slumped a little. She looked at Hua Jinyao with a little hesitation in her beautiful eyes. Jinyao? It's okay. It has nothing to do with you. Hua Jinyao held her in his arms and sighed softly. My mom is here for me. Don't worry. I understand, but I still want to say that there's nothing between Uncle and me. There's nothing between us. I know. I believe you. This was the second time Hua Jinyao said that he believed her. Su Qing Sang couldn't help but reach out to hug him. Her eyes were gentle and her expression was full of satisfaction. Thank you, Jinyao. It felt so good to be trusted so much. Hua Jinyao hugged her. What he didn't say was that he did believe Su Qing Sang. As for Zhang Yichen, he didn't want to know whether it was because he was drunk or because of something else that made him lose his composure. When Lu Tongjia returned to her room, she felt a headache. She didn't look well. She was so angry that her whole body was trembling. Hua Mingguang wasn't in the room. He was in his study with Hua Yangyuan's two sons. Hua Yangyuan's two sons, Hua Mingfan and Hua Mingqi, worked in different areas. Tianyu Group had invested in both areas. They were usually busy with work and rarely met each other. Now that they were together, Hua Mingguang naturally wanted to have a good chat with his two cousins. Lu Tongjia didn't have anyone to talk her out of it. She just couldn't take it anymore. She hadn't even thought of showing Hua Jinyao those ugly photos she had taken, but he was already taking her side without asking. Even though he saw Su Qing Sang and Zhang Yichen hugging each other with his own eyes, how could he find an excuse for Zhang Yichen? It was ridiculous and infuriating. She hadn't calmed down yet. She was still thinking about how to make Hua Jinyao face reality. On the other side, Hua Jinyao got the result after the doctor came and took Zhang Yichen's blood for a blood test. Zhang Yichen was indeed drugged. Su Qing Sang looked at the result and nodded. She looked serious when she met Hua Jinyao's eyes. Jinyao, it's just as I thought. Uncle was drugged. It seems to be a hallucinogen. That would explain why Zhang Yichen was reacting like this. Hua Jinyao looked at Su Qing Sang. She looked calm. She attributed all of Zhang Yichen's behavior to the fact that he was drugged and drunk. However, he knew that wasn't the whole truth. There was nothing wrong with Su Qing Sang, but there must be something wrong with Zhang Yichen. The drug and alcohol only made Zhang Yichen's true thoughts come to life. It didn't mean that it didn't exist. Zhang Yichen really did have that kind of feelings for Su Qing Sang. He was very sure about that now. Why would he be drugged? Who drugged him? Everyone clearly ate together before. Su Qing Sang couldn't figure it out. She couldn't help but look at Hua Jinyao with confusion in her eyes. Hua Jinyao stopped thinking. He didn't tell Su Qing Sang about Zhang Yichen's feelings for her. Chapter 573. Hua Jinyao stood there with a cold face. His facial features were cold and his eyes were sharp. I know who drugged him. Who? Su Qing Sang couldn't figure it out at all. All the guests were relatives. Strictly speaking, Su Peijian was the only one who wasn't a relative. But why would Su Peijian drug Zhang Yichen for no reason? If it wasn't her, then who among the group of guests could it be? Hua Jinyao shook his head and put his hands on Su Qingsang's shoulders. Don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. Go back to your room and rest. Then Su Qingsang glanced at the bed. Zhang Yichen was still sleeping. The doctor had given him a preliminary treatment after receiving the test results. It wasn't that heavy. If Zhang Yichen hadn't been drunk, he wouldn't have ended up like this. Uncle had an injection. He should be sleeping. He doesn't need anyone to take care of him. Su Qingsang nodded. Even if Hua Jinyao wanted her to take care of Zhang Yichen, she didn't want to do it now. It wasn't that she didn't want to save face for her relatives. It was that after what happened just now, she didn't dare to stay. Even if Zhang Yichen was drunk, he had to be careful when he was alone with Su Qingsang and Su Qingsang. I think so too. She didn't leave in a hurry because she wanted to save face for Hua Jinyao. Su Qingsang sighed in her heart and glanced at Zhang Yichen. He didn't do it on purpose, but he was the one who brought this embarrassing situation to her. However, she wasn't really mad at him, considering that he was drugged and had drunk so much. Instead, she felt sympathy for him. She didn't know who he had offended to make him suffer like this. Su Qingsang thought it was a prank, but Hua Jinyao didn't think so. After sending Su Qingsang back to her room, he went upstairs to Lu Tongjia's room. Lu Tongjia was still angry. Her anger hadn't completely dissipated even after such a long time. After a knock on the door, Hua Jinyao appeared in the room. His hands were clenched into fists. He looked at Lu Tongjia with a complicated look. Lu Tongjia felt uncomfortable being stared at like that. Before she could say anything, Hua Jinyao had already walked up to her. He looked at Lu Tongjia with disappointment in his eyes. Why are you doing this? Lu Tongjia looked at Hua Jinyao in confusion. She had no idea what he was talking about. Mom. Tell me, why did you do this? Lu Tongjia's face darkened. What did I do? Don't tell me that just because I said a few words about your wife, you're in such a rush to stand up for her. Hua Jinyao smiled bitterly. He looked at Lu Tongjia and couldn't believe that she could say something like that at a time like this. Mom, am I really your son? Are you really my mother? You can't bear to see me happy. You can't look at me, okay? What nonsense are you talking about? Lu Tongjia was angry. Who gave you the right to talk to me like that? Do you still have any respect for your mother? If you want me to put you in my eyes, then what about you? Do you really think of me as your son? Do you? Hua Jinyao took another step forward. He was tall and strong. Even though Lu Tongjia was twice his age, she still took a step back because of Hua Jinyao's imposing manner. Hua Jinyao, get out of here. Wait till I have made myself clear. I have made myself clear. I'll get out of here. What on earth are you talking about? Uncle. Only Zhang Yichen was drugged. Drugged? You were drugged? Lu Tongjia's eyes widened in shock. How could you be drugged? What drug? Hua Jinyao thought that she was just trying to hide something. He smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. Mom. Shouldn't you be the one who knows best what kind of medicine Uncle was given? What do you mean? I mean exactly what I said. For so many years, Hua Jinyao had been tolerating and giving in. He knew that Lu Tongjia didn't like him, and he knew why. He knew that he couldn't change her mind. He was used to her coldness and indifference. However, he didn't expect that one day, Lu Tongjia would use such a trick on his wife. Putting Zhang Yichen's thoughts aside, Su Qingsang was innocent. Why did she have to endure all this? Hua Jinyao, watch your attitude. What about you? Are you acting like a mother again? Hua Jinyao didn't want to bring it up. It had been a long time, and many things had been weighing on his mind. He was so heavy that he couldn't breathe. No one could truly ignore the hurt that came from their parents and relatives. He was the same. Hua Jinyao. Are you blaming me? Can't I? Hua Jinyao's eyes were sharp, and he was clearly blaming her. You say that you're my mother, but what kind of mother are you? You drugged uncle just to make me misunderstand Qingsang? I know you don't like me. But if you're unhappy with me, you can come at me. Don't hurt Qingsang. Lu Tongjia stuttered. She widened her eyes. She couldn't believe that Hua Jinyao would blame her like that. Mom, I always thought that after all these years, you should feel less resentful. But I was wrong. I don't want to talk about the past anymore. But I won't tolerate it anymore. After saying that, he turned to leave. Lu Tongjia suddenly stood in front of him. Did you say that I drugged Zhang Yichen? Didn't you? Why would I drug him? To make you misunderstand Qingsang, to make us unhappy. Don't you always like to do things like that? You have to do things that make me unhappy. Hua Jinyao. Lu Tongjia was furious. She didn't want to refute the second half of Hua Jinyao's words. She nodded her head heavily. Good, very good. I want you to misunderstand Qingsang. Is this a misunderstanding? Huh? That woman was flirting with Zhang Yichen in a place where you couldn't see her? Did I wrongly accuse her? I was just trying to make you see the truth. I believe in Qingsang's character. And what you meant by letting me see the truth was that you didn't hesitate to give uncle that kind of despicable drug in order to frame her? I drugged Zhang Yichen? Lu Tongjia was furious. Why don't you say that he was a dirty person? He was just tricked by you. Why don't you say that you just don't want me to be happy? Lu Tongjia nodded repeatedly. She was too angry. She didn't expect Hua Jinyao to rush up to her and criticize her in such a tone. She felt a ball of fire burning in her heart, making her lose all rationality. Fine. Yes. I did it. I really don't want you to be happy. What right do you have to be happy? Hua Jinyao, do you have the right to be happy? She pointed at Hua Jinyao with a fierce look, as if she wanted to vent all the resentment she had accumulated over the years. What right do you have to be happy? Everything you have now isn't yours. It's Jin Kai's. You took over your brother's position, and you killed him. Now, you have the nerve to say that I don't want you to be happy? Why should I want you to be happy? You killed my son and my daughter. Both of my children died in your hands, and you want to be happy? Based on what? What about Hua Jinyao? Why do you have to make such a request? Lu Tongjia couldn't hold it in anymore. Her eyes were red. She was not a Serbic, and she was not without a mother's heart. However, Hua Jinyao had killed her motherly heart. You should have known that when you killed them. Hua Jinyao, you are going to hell. You don't have the right to be happy. Don't you? Lu Tongjia's voice became shrill, and her body began to tremble with anger. She couldn't bear it, and she didn't want to. In fact, for so many years, she and Hua Jinyao had been maintaining a peaceful relationship on the surface. That was just the surface. Like a bubble, it would burst with a gentle poke. Just like now, she couldn't bear it anymore, and she didn't want to bear it anymore. Hua Jinyao looked at her and saw her revealing such a sharp side. This scene had actually happened once before. When his brother and sister had just died. At that time, she was like this too. She shook his shoulder in disbelief. She asked him, "Why don't you die if you're so vicious? Why didn't you die?" Memories were usually not good. Hua Jinyao closed his eyes. When he opened them again, there was no emotion in them. That's the truth, isn't it? That's what you really think, isn't it? You've always thought that way. It's just that all these years, you've been suppressing those thoughts. For you, you actually hope that I was the one who died in that accident, right? His voice was very soft, but every word was like a raindrop hitting her heart. Lu Tongjia felt a little uncomfortable for some reason, but she suppressed that discomfort. That's what you said, not what I said. She didn't say that now, but she had already said it back then. Hua Jinyao nodded. He stood up straight and his back was straight. He was tall and strong. He was mature and calm. He was Hua Jinyao, the invincible Hua Jinyao. He forced himself to be calm and indifferent, even though his heart had been riddled with holes by Lu Tongjia. But he couldn't show it on his face. He just stared at Lu Tongjia. His gaze was indifferent, and his expression was calm. However, his eyes were as deep as the sea, making it impossible to see the bottom. Mom. Do you know? I've been thinking the same thing for so many years. Why wasn't I the one who died in that accident back then? Lu Tongjia's body trembled, and her legs were a little weak. She forced herself to stand still. I'm telling the truth, Hua Jinyao looked at her and said word by word in a very soft tone. I really hope that the person who died back then was me. If the person who died was really me, I think you wouldn't be so resentful now, right? Hua Jinyao closed his eyes. He didn't want to stay any longer, so he turned around and walked straight to the door. The moment his hand touched the door handle, he stopped. He didn't turn around. He just stared at a certain spot. Tianyu Group belongs to Dad, but it also belongs to Grandpa. You don't like me and want to give Tianyu Group to someone else. I know, and I don't care. Grandpa once said that Big Brother is gone. I am the eldest grandson of the Hua family. I have to shoulder my responsibility as the eldest grandson. Whether it's Tianyu Group or the Hua family, they are all my responsibility. If you really think that I don't deserve to sit in this position, I can go and convince Grandpa. Give the position of CEO to someone else. I don't want it. Whether it's the Hua family's things or Tianyu Group. Or even myself. You can do whatever you want. I'll do whatever you want. Just a little. That's my bottom line. That's Su Qingsang. You can deal with me in any way you want. You can take away everything I have now. But if you hurt Su Qingsang, I won't let it go just like that. His grip on the door handle tightened. Finally, he opened the door and left without looking back. After he left, Lu Tongjia's legs turned to jelly. She couldn't stand and fell to the ground. She looked at the tightly closed door. For a moment, she wondered if she had done something wrong. But no one could tell her the answer. Hua Mingguang wasn't here. She couldn't discuss this matter with anyone else. She just sat on the ground. The ground was covered with a thick plush carpet, so it wasn't cold. However, she felt waves of coldness coming from all directions and surrounding her tightly. She raised her hand and pressed it against her heart, trying to convince herself that she wasn't wrong. What was wrong with her? Look at Hua Jinyao's attitude. What did he mean by his bottom line was Su Qingsang? In his heart, only Su Qingsang was human. These family members were not human anymore, right? In his heart, he only cared about Su Qingsang. She wasn't his mother, was she? Lu Tongjia kept coming up with excuses. She kept telling herself that Hua Jinyao was wrong and that he had gone too far. Look, he even slandered her and said that she drugged Zhang Yichen. Did she need to drug Zhang Yichen? Even without the drug, Zhang Yichen would still want to be with Su Qingsang. Why would he need her to add fuel to the fire? She wasn't wrong. She wasn't wrong at all. However, no matter how hard she tried to convince herself, Hua Jinyao's words and the expression on his face kept echoing in her mind. Over and over again. If he had been the one who had died, Lu Tongjia's body trembled and she fell to the ground again. She put her hands on the carpet and tried to push those thoughts away. She wasn't wrong. She wasn't wrong. She was right. But this time, even she wasn't sure about herself. When Hua Jinyao returned to the room, Su Qingsang had just taken a shower. When Zhang Yichen held her in his arms, she smelled of alcohol, which made her very uncomfortable. As a doctor, even if she wasn't a Virgo, she was more obsessed with cleanliness than the average person. She had just dried her hair when Hua Jinmiao came in. Jinmiao? He said that he was going to find the person who drugged her. Su Qingsang asked him who it was, but he wouldn't tell her. Seeing his gloomy face, she looked at him worriedly. Before she could get up, Hua Jinmiao walked behind her and hugged her. Jinmiao? He hugged her tightly, so tightly that she was almost buried in his body. Su Qingsang couldn't move. She raised her hands and gently hugged Hua Jinmiao's back. They looked at each other without saying a word. The atmosphere in the room was silent. Su Qingsang heard Hua Jinmiao's heartbeat. It seemed to be faster than usual. She couldn't help but want to raise her head, but the back of her head was pressed against his chest. She couldn't move at all. It was a very uncomfortable position, but she couldn't push him away. It wasn't that she couldn't, but that she didn't want to. She just leaned against his chest, letting him hug her tightly with a strength that could almost hurt her, not letting go. Until she heard his heartbeat slow down. She pressed her lips together and pressed her face against his chest. Who drugged me? Can you tell me? Hua Jinmiao didn't say anything. She felt his body tense up. She thought for a moment. Someone who could make Hua Jinmiao act like this couldn't be an outsider. That drug, was it your mother who drugged me? She wasn't sure. At least, she couldn't think of a reason why Lu Tongjia would do that. However, Hua Jinmiao's body stiffened almost instantly, which made her sure of it. She suddenly raised her head, ignoring his hand that was still on the back of her head. Her pretty eyes were full of shock. She looked at him in disbelief. Really? Hua Jinmiao pressed his lips into a straight line. He hugged her very tightly. Su Qingsang didn't know what to say. She was a smart woman. She didn't even need to think to figure out why Lu Tongjia did that. She didn't like me, so she drugged Zhang Yichen? So that you would see it and misunderstand me? No way. She went around in circles just to set me up. If that was the case, Su Qingsang really admired Lu Tongjia. No one else could be so calculative. Hua Jinmiao looked at Su Qingsang and hugged her again. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Qingsang. Su Qingsang could sense the apology in his words, but she still felt that something was wrong, as if something was wrong. That's not right. Su Qingsang looked up at him. It doesn't make sense, does it? After all, if I didn't go out to make the call. If I didn't go out to the hallway? Won't her plan fail? Why did you go out to the hallway? Hua Jinmiao thought of what happened just now. Su Qingsang glanced at her phone and said, I went out to answer the call. It was from Mengwan. I didn't want to disturb you, so I went out. So you see, it doesn't make sense at all. If I didn't go out, she wouldn't have had the chance. Besides, how did she know that I would go out to make the call at that time? I don't think she needed to know that you would call at that time. Hua Jinmiao's face was cold. He thought of what Lu Tongjia had done recently, all these years. He really couldn't be happy. In fact, I think even if you didn't go out to make the call, she would have found a way to get you out at that time. Are you so sure? Of course. She was the one who brought the hangover soup. She knows very well which room Uncle usually sleeps in. Hua Jinmiao looked down at Su Qingsang with a sullen face. In fact, it might be because you ran away. Another thing was that his uncle's willpower was strong. He didn't really hurt you. Otherwise, she could have called all the other members of the Hua family here. When they came and saw that you were her niece's daughter-in-law, but you had an affair with your uncle, they would misunderstand. At that time, no matter how much I trust you, I'm afraid you won't be able to stay in the Hua family anymore. It was true that old Master Hua loved him and valued him. However, old Master Hua wouldn't let such a scandal happen. He wouldn't allow such a thing to happen to his family. Hua Jinmiao knew that, and so did Su Qingsang. If Su Qingsang and Zhang Yichen were really caught, even if she knew it was fake, what would old Master Hua think? Even if they could find out later and say that Zhang Yichen was drunk and drugged. Who would believe that? Zhang Yichen was a relative of the Hua family. He was old Master Hua's nephew. They couldn't do anything to him, but they could turn around and deal with her. Not to mention that Zhang Yichen was a soldier. If he did such a thing, his family wouldn't tolerate him. He might even lose his military identity. Thinking about it this way, the person who drugged him was really ruthless. But she still had a strange feeling that Lu Tongjia wouldn't do such a thing. I'm telling the truth that your mother doesn't like me. But what reason does she have to deal with uncle? After all, he's Grandaunt's son. He's also Grandaunt's favorite youngest son. She has a reason. Hua Jinyao said expressionlessly. He thought of the time when he was in the army. Before he went abroad to study, he would go to Zhang Yichen's army every summer and winter vacation. Zhang Yichen and he were not only uncle and nephew, but also good friends like brothers. Lu Tongjia knew this. She just couldn't bear to see him do well. She didn't want to see anyone who was good to him, no matter who it was. She came up with such a way to drive a wedge between him and Su Qingsang, and at the same time, make his relationship with Zhang Yichen worse. Two birds with one stone. Was that right? Su Qingsang lowered her head. She felt that something was wrong. But hearing Hua Jinyao's analysis, she felt that it was normal. You don't have to excuse her. She admitted it herself. Su Qingsang's eyes widened. She was really shocked this time. She admitted it? Yes. Hua Jinyao hugged Su Qingsang again. From an angle that she couldn't see, his face was full of pain. It was so painful to be hurt by someone close to her. Hua Jinyao, and might be, she wanted to say a few words for Lu Tongjia, but even she felt that such an explanation would be too weak and useless. Su Qingsang thought of what Lu Tongjia had said last time. She thought of the kidnapping and the departure of Hua Jinyao's brother and sister. She raised her head to look at Hua Jinyao. She was full of questions. She really couldn't believe that Hua Jinyao was that kind of person. Even though he was still young at that time. Hua Jinyao hugged her tightly and rested his chin on the top of her head. He looked at a certain point in the void, and the nightmarish kidnapping case from that year flashed through his mind. Chapter 574. Why? Su Qingsang's heartbeat quickened. Was Hua Jinyao going to tell her what happened back then? Because, Hua Jinyao paused. He didn't know what to say. Su Qingsang felt his stiffness and hesitation. She looked up at him with a gentle gaze. If you don't want to say it, then don't. She had promised him that she would give him time. There were people in the hospital who had been traumatized, and some of them were unwilling to talk about their pain for the rest of their lives. She understood that feeling. Hua Jinyao shook his head. In fact, it wasn't that he didn't want to say it. He just didn't know how to say it. There were some things that he thought he had forgotten after more than 10 years, but he hadn't. He clearly remembered every detail, every scene, every word. Those were nightmares that he could not get rid of, but now he was no longer afraid of them. But there were still repercussions. Su Qingsang moved away from his arms and held his hand tightly. Hua Jinyao. She didn't want to see him embarrassed, so she took his hand, walked to the chaise longue in the room, and sat down. She held his hand tightly in hers. Her hand was so small that it couldn't completely wrap around his big hand. But even so, she still held his hand tightly and refused to let go. Don't make things difficult for yourself. If you don't want to say it, you don't have to. Hua Jinyao looked at her holding his hand without saying a word. The conflict with Lu Tongjia was still fresh in his mind. Lu Tongjia really hated him. Actually, Lu Tongjia didn't have to hate him. He hated himself too. Didn't I tell you? I'm not the only child my parents have. Su Qingsang already knew, so she wasn't surprised. She didn't respond but just looked at Hua Jinyao. At that moment, she knew he only needed a listener. Hua Jinyao could still remember his brother's face, which was 50% similar to his, but older and more mature. He was only 2 years older than him. Back then, Hua Jinkai was only 14 years old, but he already looked like an adult. They went to school together and played basketball together. Occasionally, he would hear his brother say that he had received another love letter. Then, Big Brother would return those love letters tactfully. He was very nice to people. In the beginning, he had been nurtured little by old Master Hua. No matter where he was, he would take care of everyone's emotions. Because he had long understood that the two brothers had different personalities, and their future development would also be different. Her brother was the heir of the Hua family and the head of the Hua family. He was different. As the second son, he didn't have that much pressure. At that time, Hua Jinyao felt so lucky to have such a brother. She shielded him from the wind and rain and shouldered all the responsibilities. A steady older brother who loved to take care of others, and a younger sister. Hua Wushuang. Unparalleled in the world, what a great name. It was enough to show that in the hearts of the Hua family's parents, she was their most precious daughter. Hua Jinyao still remembered his sister's cute and childish look. He remembered that she always liked to follow behind him and call him brother with her childish voice. He still remembered every happy moment, and they lived together in this mansion. He and his elder brother liked to play basketball. Every time they came back from a game, Hua Wushuang would cover her nose and say that the sweat on them stinks. She wouldn't mind the smell at all and would throw herself at them, asking them to hug her. Every time he went to school and came home, Hua Wushuang would run to him with her short legs. "Brother, you're back? Brother, I missed you so much when you weren't home. Brother, I ate some snacks at home today. It was delicious. Try some too. Brother. Mom doesn't let me eat candy. I'll only eat one. Don't tell Mom, okay?" Every time, Hua Wushuang would blink and slyly try to make him her accomplice. At this time, he would quietly put the candy in her mouth and make a shushing gesture. Then little Wushuang would laugh like a little squirrel. Then she stood up, leaned towards his face, and kissed him with a smack sound. She accidentally broke an antique vase that Lu Tongjia liked very much, and then she would cry. However, when she saw him, she would immediately stop crying and raise her hand. Ah! That vase was suddenly broken by a kitten. It wasn't me. After he saw through her, she snuggled into his arms and said, "Don't tell Mom. I'll be careful next time. I won't break the vase again." She was still thinking that she would be scolded, but when he took the initiative to stand up and say that she broke the vase, she confessed. She told Lu Tongjia that she broke the vase, and it had nothing to do with her brother. Sometimes, she would do something bad because she was too kind. For example, she put her favorite chocolate in his pocket, but the weather was hot, and the melted chocolate stained his clothes. For example, she liked to eat ice cream, but she always had diarrhea. So she always came to the two brothers to please them, saying that she only needed to have a taste. When he turned to face Lu Tongjia, she looked guilty, as if she hadn't eaten ice cream at all. In fact, Lu Tongjia knew that she also liked to see them have a good relationship. A sister like that, soft and fragrant. A little girl who would make people feel that the world was beautiful when he held her in his arms. Her life was forever fixed at 4.5 years old. She didn't even have time to go to elementary school or high school. He didn't have the chance to watch her grow up and find a boyfriend. At that time, he could be a brother. He could teach those boys who pursued her a good lesson. So many regrets, so much pain. And so many regrets. But if they didn't eat, they would be tied up for 3 days. 3 days later, they would probably starve to death. Whatever Hua Jinyao could think of, the criminals could naturally think of as well. Chen Si glanced at the Hua siblings before turning to look at brother Da. "Let's give them something to eat. Otherwise, they will starve to death on the day of the ransom. That's not good." Da glanced in their direction. He agreed. Hua Jinyao thought that Chen Si was a good person when he mentioned it. He walked up to them and put down the lunch boxes, but didn't put down his chopsticks. He didn't even untie the Hua siblings. I'm sorry, young masters. What about you? Are you going to eat on your stomach? Hua Jinyao and Hua Jinkai were tied up and lying on the ground. If they really wanted to eat the lunch boxes on the ground, they would have to lie on their stomachs. As the young master of the Hua family, Hua Jinkai had never been humiliated like this before. He raised his foot to kick Chen Si, but Hua Jinyao stopped him. However, she was stopped by Hua Jinyao. He was also angry. He was angry. But they had guns, and the others had knives. They were no match for them. If they really fought, they would be at a disadvantage. With that in mind, Hua Jinyao wouldn't let Hua Jinkai resist. After all, he had heard many stories like this when he was in the army with Zhang Yichen. Hua Jinkai was the eldest son of the Hua family, so he calmed down quickly. He glanced at Hua Jinyao, signaling with his eyes that he was fine. However, it was impossible for the two of them to eat like dogs. The two of them sat across from each other. Neither of them touched the lunch boxes. Boy, you have guts. Never mind. Let's see how long you can last. Chen Si turned and walked away. When he returned to the place where the lunch boxes were, he exclaimed. Damn it. How are we going to eat with masks on? The others turned to look at Hua Jinyao and his brother. Liang, Chen Si, and Wang Ming were different from Brother De. Only Brother De wasn't wearing a mask. The other three were all wearing masks. De was a Class A wanted criminal. His arrest warrant had been issued all over the country. However, the three of them weren't. They didn't want to end up like that. They didn't want to be seen by the Hua siblings, so they all wore masks. It was time for dinner, but the three of them weren't in front of the Hua siblings. Fortunately, the warehouse was spacious. The three of them went to the other side of the warehouse and finished their dinner. Just as they finished their dinner, Hua Wushuang woke up. As soon as she woke up, Hua Wushuang found that she was not in her happy home, nor was she in the amusement park. The warehouse in front of her was cold, dark, dirty, and smelly. How could she stand living in such an environment? Besides, she was only 4 years old. She didn't know anything yet. She burst into tears. Hua Jinyao and his brother panicked when they saw her crying. Wushuang, don't cry. Wushuang, stop. Don't cry. The gangsters were still eating at the other side of the warehouse. If they heard Hua Wushuang's crying, they would get impatient. As expected, before Hua Jinyao and Hua Jinyao could finish their conversation, Brother De spat out the toothpick in his mouth and walked toward them. Hearing the footsteps, Hua Jinkai panicked. He didn't care that he was tied up. He moved to Hua Wushuang. Wushuang, calm down. Don't cry. Brother, I feel bad. As the little princess of the Hua family, Hua Wushuang had never suffered like this. My feet hurt. My hands hurt too. Why did you tie me up? Was it because I wanted to come to the amusement park? No, no. Hua Jinkai moved closer to his sister. His face was full of anxiety. Wushuang, my dear Wushuang. Don't cry. You didn't do anything wrong. We are playing a game of soldiers catching robbers. Don't cry. When this game is over, we can go home. Soldiers catching robbers? Little Wushuang blinked. She was young, but she had watched TV. We are playing a game? Yes, Hua Jinyao said. Wushuang, we are playing a game. We are playing a hostage caught by the bad guys. Do you remember the movie I took you to see? Yes. Hua Wushuang stopped crying. The bad guys were caught, and the hostage was rescued. Yes. That's great. That's it. While Hua Jinyao was talking, he saw De walking toward them. He stood up and blocked Hua Wushuang's body. Wushuang, the bad guys are coming. Don't talk. Don't provoke them, okay? Okay. I know. Hua Wushwang was too young, and she trusted Hua Jinyao and Hua Jinkai too much. If they said it was a play, then it was a play. If they said it was a game, then it was a game. However, there was one more thing that Hua Wushwang couldn't stand. Brother, my hands and feet hurt so much. Can you loosen the ropes a little? Why do you have to tie them so tightly? Hua Jinyao and Hua Jinkai couldn't answer Hua Wushwang's question. They didn't have time to answer. Do was already walking toward them. He looked at Hua Jinyao and Hua Jinkai and sneered. Hey, little girl, you're awake? You look so young. As De spoke, he reached out to touch Hua Wushwang's face. Hua Jinkai was tied up, but when he saw Da's movement, he stood in front of Hua Wushwang. Hua Wushwang was young, but she wasn't stupid. She was young, but she had a feeling that Da wasn't a good person. She curled up and hid behind Hua Jinyao. Little girl. I'm not a bad person. Didn't you hear what your brother said? We're just acting. We're just messing around with you. Hua Wushwang leaned against Hua Jinyao. She didn't want to believe Da's words. Da wasn't angry. He glanced at the faces of the boys and finally fixed his eyes on Hua Wushwang. He clicked his tongue. She's so pretty. She's a real beauty. She's still so young, but she's already so cute. I wonder how beautiful she'll be when she grows up. Da stared at Hua Wushwang, which made Hua Jinkai feel sick. Hua Jinkai and Hua Jinkai blocked Hua Wushwang's body. He was already 14 years old, and 1.7 meters tall. Da couldn't see anything now that he was in the way. He spat and glanced at the cold lunchbox on the ground beside him. Suddenly, he kicked it hard. The lunchbox was knocked over, and the food inside spilled out. Da looked at Hua Jinyao and Hua Jinkai. I'm so sorry. I didn't see your feet. You can eat it like this. The food on the top should still be edible. Hua Jinkai and Hua Jinkai clenched their teeth again. However, they both managed to hold back their anger. Da found it boring. He spat and stood up straight, glancing coldly at Hua Jinkai and Hua Jinkai. Kid, don't be rude. Don't be rude here. I gave you food, so eat it. You don't want to eat it? Then you won't have to eat it from tomorrow onwards. As he spoke, he kicked the other lunchbox away. The food was mixed together and covered with the dust of the warehouse. It looked like it would never be edible again. Hua Wushwang pouted and almost cried again. Hua Jinyao turned around and glanced at her. Da was happy after his trick. Da left. The 3 kidnappers had finished eating as well. The 4 of them gathered together and began to play cards in the dim light. Hua Wushwang had been holding back, but after midnight, she couldn't stand it anymore. Brother, I'm so scared. Brother, they're not playing games with us, are they? Brother. Are we going to die? Although she was young, she knew fear. She asked every question in a low voice. No, you won't die. Wushwang, trust me. I won't let you die. Hua Jinkai's heart was broken when he saw his sister so scared. His hands and feet were tied up again. Otherwise, he would have picked her up and comforted her. Hua Jinyao was thinking the same thing. He looked at the kidnappers. They were playing cards at the climax of the game, so no one was paying attention to them. De seemed to have lost money, and he kept cursing. Hua Jinyao glanced at Hua Jinkai. Hua Jinkai was thinking the same thing. The 2 brothers looked at each other and understood each other. Both Hua Jinyao and Hua Jinkai were thinking about running away. If the kidnappers didn't give them food or water for 3 days, they would be dead. Even if the ransom came, they would be dead. If they didn't find a way to escape, they would starve to death. But if they ran away, it would be risky. There were 4 kidnappers, all tall and strong adult men. Moreover, they were armed with guns. Against these people, their chances of winning were too small. De and the other kidnappers had been playing cards. Hua Jinyao comforted Hua Wushwang, telling her to rest and not to worry. Don't worry. You can sleep. Maybe you'll be home tomorrow. Hua Wushwang couldn't sleep. She was scared. But she trusted Hua Jinyao. Maybe he was telling the truth. Perhaps after a good night's sleep, she would be able to wake up at home the next day. Hua Jinyao looked at Hua Jinkai when he saw his sister was so cooperative. They were talking in a low voice. They couldn't alert the kidnappers, and they couldn't let them hear them. When Hua Jinyao was in the army with Zhang Yichen, he had learned how to untie the ropes on his hands when he was tied up. Zhang Yichen had taught him how to untie the ropes on his hands. It worked on any rope. But he didn't know that the ropes De had prepared for them were so difficult to untie. Hua Jinyao tried for a long time. His hands hurt, but he still couldn't untie the ropes. He glanced at Hua Jinkai. Hua Jinkai also tried for a long time, but he couldn't untie the ropes either. The two brothers were unable to untie each other, so they could only lean back against each other again. They wanted to untie each other's ropes first by moving back to back. Every time they moved, they glanced at De and the other kidnappers. De and the other kidnappers were so engrossed in the game that none of them paid attention to them. Their hands were behind their backs, and the ropes were tied tightly. Hua Jinyao and Hua Jinkai tried for a long time, but to no avail. By then, De had been playing cards for almost the whole night. Damn it, I don't believe I can't win. He stared at the table, his eyes shining. His face was filled with determination and anger. Duh. If we can't win, we can't win. We'll have money soon anyway. Yeah, duh. 150 million. Each of us will get 37.5 million. Think about it, when the time comes, your money will be nothing. Liang hadn't won the most money that day, so he dared to say that. De glanced at Hua Jinkai and Hua Jinkai, only to find that they were still sitting there quietly. He turned around, pulled out a card, and threw it out. What's this? Let me tell you. Who doesn't want more money? Hua Jinyao and Hua Jinkai had a hard time untying the ropes. They were waiting for the kidnappers to go to bed. They wanted to hurry up. However, they didn't expect that the kidnappers would stay up all night. They had no intention of stopping to rest. Hua Wushwang was tired from crying. She had already fallen asleep. Hua Jinyao spent a long time untying the ropes on Hua Jinkai's wrists. He didn't dare untie them. He could only wait for them to go to bed. Hua Jinyao and Hua Jinkai were very sleepy, and the places where they had been kicked by De were hurting. They stayed alert, waiting for De and the other kidnappers to go to bed. Chapter 575. Neither Hua Jinyao nor Hua Jinkai had ever experienced anything like this. Neither of them had ever suffered such torment. However, they could not afford to panic, nor could they afford to be disorderly. He could only wait for De and the other kidnappers to go to sleep. De did go to bed. Before going to bed, he walked over to Hua Jinkai's side and pointed the gun at Hua Jinkai and Su Qingsang. Stinking brat. I'm telling you, you'd better stay put. This way, when Grandpa wakes up tomorrow, he might be in a good mood and untie the rope for you to eat. After saying that, De went to sleep at the other end of the warehouse. There were a few old sofas there, barely enough to sleep on for one night. As for Liang and the others, they had arranged their own tasks. Chen Si kept watch for the first half of the night and Wang Ming for the second half. As for Liang, he was responsible for getting up from time to patrol outside. After the work was done, Wang Ming and Liang went to rest. Chen Si was left behind to watch them. Hua Jinyao breathed a sigh of relief. As long as the other party went to rest, his chance had come. That was what he really thought. He waited for the criminals to fall asleep. He turned to look at Hua Jinkai. She signaled with her eyes that they could begin now. Hua Jinkai nodded. Using his body as a shield, he untied all the ropes around his hands. So did Hua Jinyao. The two of them didn't dare to untie the ones on their feet in one breath. He was afraid that the noise would be too loud and alert the criminals. After he untied his own hands, he started to untie Hua Wushwang's body. Hua Wushwang had hit her head and was knocked unconscious by the criminal. After she woke up, she cried for a long time. She was so tired that she didn't wake up even after the rope was untied. Hua Jinyao glanced at Dada's eyes were closed, and he seemed to be sleeping soundly. Meanwhile, Chen Si sat by the mahjong table and smoked. He puffed out a cloud of smoke and did not look over. Wang Ming, who had been keeping watch for the second half of the night, had already gone to bed. Only Liang was left patrolling outside. Hua Jinyao and Hua Jinkai communicated with each other through their eyes. In fact, what they were going to do next was quite risky. But in order to escape, they couldn't care less. The two brothers' plan was very simple. They would escape when they were asleep and their guard was at its weakest. The other side only had 4 people, while they had 2. Hua Jinkai worked out regularly, so he was in good shape. Although Hua Jinyao was 2 years younger, he had already been in the army. Neither of them looked short, so there was still hope if they worked hard. The two of them wanted to deal with Chen Si first. It would be best if he could land a hit and knock Chen Si unconscious. Wang Ming and Brother Da were asleep, so he didn't want to disturb them. The warehouse was huge. As long as they escaped from this warehouse, they should be safe when they ran outside. Hua Jinkai loosened the ropes that bound the 3 men's legs. He looked at Hua Jinyao. She whispered in his ear. I don't think so. The opponent had a gun. If we can't escape, we'll be in danger. But if we don't escape, we'll still be in danger. Hua Jinyao pursed his lips and glanced at Da. That person had a gun, but he wasn't wearing a mask. How do you know that he will really follow the agreement and let you go after getting the money? The other party didn't even cover his face. It was obvious that he wasn't afraid of them testifying against him. It was very likely that the enemy had no intention of letting them return home safely. They wanted to kill the hostages after getting the money. Hua Jinyao's analysis made sense. However, Hua Jinkai had a different idea. He masked his face, but the others haven't. Maybe we still have a chance. Hua Jinyao never liked to pin his hopes on others. If he had a chance to escape, why wouldn't he? Hua Jinkai was mature and steady. He didn't think this was a good plan. Jinyao, there are too many of them. They're not just one person. How about we wait a little longer? He trusted the police and his family to get them out. It wasn't that Hua Jinyao didn't trust them. But that would be too long. He glanced at Hua Wushwang. We can wait here. What about Wushwang? They were not young anymore, and they were boys. They didn't care if it was cold or hungry for a few days. But Wushwang was only 4.5 years old. How could they let Hua Wushwang suffer here for 3 days? When Hua Jinyao mentioned Hua Wushwang, Hua Jinkai hesitated. Yes, they could stay here for 3 days. They could wait for their parents to pay the ransom and get them out. But Hua Wushwang was so young. What would happen if she stayed here for 3 days? Hua Jinkai didn't hesitate anymore. He nodded at Hua Jinyao. The two of them decided to escape together. Hua Jinkai was older, so he carried Hua Wushwang. Hua Jinyao knocked Chen Si out. Then, they could leave the warehouse without alerting Da and Wang Ming. The door of the warehouse was closed. If they wanted to go out, they would definitely make some noise. Liang, who was guarding the warehouse, would be alerted. So, the best solution was for the two of them to take down 3 of the hostages at the same time. That wasn't realistic. Although Hua Jinyao had trained in the army for a few days, he wasn't so arrogant as to think that the two of them could take down 2 of the hostages at the same time. So, the last solution was to knock Chen Si out and then run away. Hua Jinyao asked Hua Jinkai to carry Hua Wushwang. He sat there and pretended to stretch his limbs. Chen Si was smoking and puffing out smoke. His vision wasn't very clear. Besides, he wasn't looking at them. Hua Jinyao knew that he had to hit Chen Si. He quickly got up and quietly walked behind Chen Si. When he was unprepared, he hit the back of Chen Si's head hard. Chen Si fell to the ground. Hua Jinyao didn't know if he was dead or alive. Hua Jinyao didn't want to make any noise and wake Da and Wang Ming up. He used all his strength to hold Chen Si steady and then made him lie on the table. The first step was successful. Hua Jinyao felt relieved and turned to look at Hua Jinkai. He had Hua Wushwang on his back. Hua Jinyao glanced in Da's direction. He was glad that there were some big, useless boxes in the warehouse, which blocked his view. He quietly approached the side of the warehouse. He opened the door slightly. The old wooden door of the warehouse let out a low squeak. Hua Jinyao's heart was beating fast. However, he quickly looked outside. He didn't see Liang, which made him panic. If Liang ran away at this moment, they would be discovered. Hua Jinkai was already walking over with Hua Wushwang on his back. Hua Wushwang was lying on his back. Her face was squeezed together, as if she was about to wake up. Hua Jinyao didn't have time to think about it. He turned around and walked out of the warehouse. He wanted to find Liang and get rid of him. However, he went out and looked left and right, but he did not see Liang. Hua Jinyao knew that they were in trouble. But they were already out. The only thing they could do was try to run away. Who knew how far they could run? Liang ran out from an unknown corner. "Kid, you still want to run?" Hua Jinyao heard Liang shout. He glanced at Hua Jinkai. "Brother, run." He told Hua Jinkai to go first, while he stayed to deal with Liang. Liang shouted into the warehouse. "Duh! The kid is running away." Hua Jinyao knew that the situation was not good. He signaled Hua Jinkai to run, while he threw a punch at Liang. "Kid! Not bad." Liang didn't expect Hua Jinyao's sudden move and was hit. He spat out a mouthful of blood with a grimace on his face. When Hua Jinyao swung his fist at him again, he grabbed his fist and punched him with the back of his hand. Hua Jinyao didn't expect Liang to be so good at martial arts. He was hit as well. Hua Jinyao took the punch. The opponent's punch was fierce and heavy. He couldn't help but let out a low cry. Hua Jinkai didn't expect his brother to be hit. He stopped and looked at Hua Jinyao, wanting to help. The night was too dark. The only source of light was the reflection of the fire in the warehouse. Hua Jinyao saw what Hua Jinkai was doing. He panicked. He didn't even care about the punch on his face. "Brother, run. Don't worry about me. Hurry up and run." Hua Jinkai glanced at him, gritted his teeth, and carried Hua Wushwang on his back. He didn't expect Hua Wushwang to wake up at that moment. It was too cold outside. She heard Hua Jinyao's voice again. She woke up. It was so dark. She was scared. Before she could cry out, she saw out of the corner of her eye that Hua Jinyao was being beaten. She was too young to see it clearly at first. When she saw it clearly, she burst into tears. "Don't hit my brother. Don't hit my brother. Stop. Don't hit my brother. Brother. Brother." She struggled to get off Hua Jinkai's back. Hua Jinkai was worried about Hua Jinyao. He lost his balance and let Hua Wushwang jump off his back. "Wushwang." Hua Jinyao and Hua Jinkai both saw Wushwang's movement and shouted. But it was useless. Wushwang was already running toward Hua Jinyao. At the same time, Da and Wang Ming woke up with a start. Even Chen Si was woken up by Da's kick. "Wushwang." Hua Jinyao was desperate. He saw Hua Wushwang's small body run toward them. Liang punched her in the face several times. "Wushwang, run." Run with big brother. Don't come near me. Wushuang. He was punched in the face again. Liang kicked Hua Jinyao. His body flew out, and Hua Wushuang cried even harder. She rushed to Hua Jinyao. Brother. Brother. Wushuang, run. Hua Jinyao hated himself. He really hated himself. He hated himself for not being careful. He hated himself for thinking that there were so many things he could do when he was older. He hated himself for suggesting that they should run. He was hit by De and watched helplessly as De picked up Wushuang's body. Hua Jinkai rushed over and threw a punch at De. De kicked him away and threw Wushuang's small body to the ground. Wushuang. The two brothers screamed at the same time. In the night sky, Hua Wushuang's cries sounded so mournful and painful. Wushuang. The two brothers quickly got up and tried to run to Hua Wushuang. But it was useless. Hua Jinyao had already been restrained by Wang Ming and Chen Si, who had run out. Liang blocked Hua Jinkai's way. He kicked him a few times and punched him. Although he was only 14, he was as tall as an adult. But he was not as tall as Liang. They didn't know that Liang was a boxer until later. How could they win against a boxer like him when they were so young? Hua Jinyao was punched by Chen Si. You little bastard. How dare you hit me? Kid, you must be tired of living. You're good. Come on, hit me. Hua Jinyao didn't know how many times he had been hit. But none of the pain was comparable to the pain he felt when De picked Hua Wushuang up. Let her go. Let her go. Do you hear me? Let her go. His cry was incomparably mournful. But it was useless. De threw Hua Wushuang's body again. She cried even harder. At this moment, De didn't forget to give him a kick. He didn't know where he kicked, but Hua Wushuang stopped crying. On the other side, Hua Jinkai had been beaten up for so long that he was on the verge of collapsing. Hua Jinyao had never experienced such despair. He yelled at De, let them go. Let them go. I'm telling you, it's useless to kidnap them. My mother didn't give birth to them. My mother won't pay a ransom for them. They are illegitimate children of the Hua family. Do you hear me? It's useless to kidnap them. Let them go. Why did he have to run that night? If they had been hostages, if he hadn't encouraged Hua Jinkai to run away, would they have been able to live safely? He didn't know. He didn't have an answer. On the third day, his limbs were tied up and he was beaten badly. He could only watch as Hua Wushuang's breathing became heavier and heavier. No matter how hard he screamed, Wushuang didn't open her eyes. At that moment, he screamed in despair. Wushuang. Wushuang. His little sister. She wasn't even 5 years old. How could she die like this? Ah. Hua Jinkai had suffered enough in the past few days. His body was very weak. When he heard Hua Jinkai's scream, he opened his swollen eyes. He saw Wushuang lying on the ground without a sound. Hua Jinkai screamed even more desperately than Hua Jinyao. However, Hua Jinkai hadn't eaten for days and had been beaten all day. His voice was hoarse. He screamed, and when De and the others came over, he rushed up and knocked De down without a care. De was angry. His gun was in his pocket. He fired at Hua Jinkai. Hua Jinkai's body fell to the ground. But this time, Hua Jinyao didn't even know how to scream. He stared at Hua Jinkai and Hua Wushuang in front of him. He couldn't believe that the big brother he respected the most and the little sister he loved the most were gone just like that. Brother? Wushuang? Stop playing. Get up. It's been 3 days. We can go home now. Get up. Ah. He curled up on the ground, groaning in pain. De didn't have the patience to listen to him and was about to shoot him. Wang Ming stopped him. Don't be impulsive, De. If all the hostages die, we won't get a single cent, De still had a shred of reason left in him. He nodded and signaled Chen Si to cover Hua Jinyao's mouth. Still angry, he kicked Hua Jinyao a few more times. Finally, he let Hua Jinyao go. Hua Jinyao couldn't feel the pain anymore. 3 days. 3 whole days. He was tortured both physically and mentally. His willpower had long since been exhausted. He fainted. His last thought before he lost consciousness was that he could finally be reunited with Hua Jinkai and Hua Wuxuang. That was good. The 3 of them could still be brother and sister. What he didn't know was that the case was so big that it had alarmed many people. Although the Hua family was anxious, they thought that the hostages wouldn't kill them for the money. By the time they found the 4 hostages and subdued them, Hua Jinkai and Hua Wuxuang were gone forever. As for Hua Jinyao, he didn't know if it was because he was physically strong or because he had a strong will. He was in a coma for 3 whole days. Finally, he woke up. Many things had happened while he was in a coma. For example, De and the others had tried to reduce their crimes. They claimed that Hua Jinkai's 2 lives were manslaughter. Of course, that was impossible. Hua Wuxuang hadn't been killed by De. But she was only 4 years old. She had been seriously injured and couldn't have survived. Hua Jinkai had killed her on purpose. It was true that De had killed Hua Jinkai. But he said that he didn't want to kill Hua Jinkai. Hua Jinyao had asked him to. He also told the police what Hua Jinyao had said when he was pretending to be a hero. "Look, comrade police, he was the one who asked us to kill him. Because if his brother and sister died, he would have a share of the family property." In order to reduce his crime, De lied. Of course, the police didn't believe him. However, the other gangsters all insisted that Hua Jinyao had indeed said that. The transcript was not open to the public. Even the trial was not open. However, Lu Tongjia and the other members of the Hua family could see the transcript. Lu Tongjia had lost 2 children. She was already in a very bad mood. When he thought of what the note said, he was naturally quite angry and furious. When she went to see Hua Jinyao, she heard him talking in his sleep. "I'm telling you, it's useless to kidnap them. My mother didn't give birth to them. My mother won't pay a ransom for them. They are all illegitimate children of the Hua family. Do you hear me? It's useless to kidnap them. I am the most beloved child of the Hua family." He repeated it over and over again, which made Lu Tongjia's heart turn cold. She also reminded herself to believe in her children. She believed that Hua Jinyao wasn't that kind of person. But when Hua Jinyao woke up, what did he say? "Yes, it's me. It's all me. I'm the one who killed them." No one could understand Hua Jinyao's self-blame and pain. He regretted it countless times. He wished that time could stop on that day, the night they were kidnapped. If that happened, he would be humble, would never stand up for them, and would never try to be a hero. He would definitely do everything he could to ensure that everyone, including his brother and sister, would survive. But there were no ifs in life. What had happened would not give him a chance to regret. He was 12 years old. He was a child. He could use such an excuse to explain his behavior. However, he could not overcome his own conscience and his own feelings. So for so many years, he knew that Lu Tongjia had misunderstood him. He knew that Lu Tongjia deliberately made things difficult for him. But he never explained it. Chapter 576. I'm the one who killed them. After that, there was a strange silence in the room. Su Qingsang looked at Hua Jinyao. She couldn't believe that there was such a person in the world. Because he felt that he had killed his brother and sister, he didn't explain himself even though he knew that his mother had misunderstood him. For so many years, he had endured such misunderstandings alone. What kind of pain was it to endure such torment? Su Qingsang felt a sharp pain in her heart. The pain made her realize that her face was covered with tears. People always hoped for miracles in life, but most of the time, there were no miracles in the world. The deaths of Hu Jinkai and Hu Wushuang were both regrettable. Something that shouldn't have happened had happened. It was already a tragedy. No matter how much Hu Jinyao regretted it, he couldn't save his brother and sister's lives. He couldn't forgive himself. He couldn't forgive himself for being impulsive when he was 12 years old. So for the past 10 or 20 years, he had been torturing himself in this way. Wasn't this kind of torment another tragedy? For the first time, Hu Jinyao didn't notice Su Qingsang's tears. He was immersed in his memories. In fact, he rarely recalled the past. Very rarely. If possible, he even hoped that he could lose his memory. He wanted to forget the 3 days he had been kidnapped. Those 3 days were the darkest days of his life. The torture and pain he had experienced were nightmares that he would never be able to forget. Su Qingsang's face was covered with tears. In her eyes, Hu Jinyao's figure had become a blurry shadow. She moved her lips and wanted to say something, but her throat seemed to be blocked by cotton. She couldn't say a word. She hugged Hu Jinyao tightly and forcefully. Hu Jinyao stood there without moving. His body was very stiff. He was completely immersed in the emotions brought about by the kidnapping. After so many years, he had no one to talk about his self-blame and guilt. He had no one to talk about the pain of losing his family. Who should he talk to? The Hu family? They were all suffering the same pain as him. Lu Tongjia was the one who suffered the most. She had lost 2 children in one day. One was the eldest son she was proud of. One was the little daughter she had been looking forward to seeing for a long time. Hu Jinyao understood Lu Tongjia's pain. Therefore, when he found out that Lu Tongjia had misunderstood him, he couldn't argue back. Hu Jinkai had tried to stop him, and he had told him about it. But he refused to listen, stubbornly going his own way. In the end, it resulted in such an outcome. He clearly only needed to wait for 3 days. As long as he endured through those 3 days, everything would be fine. But he couldn't wait. His brother and sister didn't survive either. Hu Jinyao didn't cry. Ever since he was 12 years old, he hadn't shed a single tear. For such a long time, he had been bitterly suppressing it, desperately holding on. He had gotten used to Lu Tongjia's cold treatment over the past decade. For a long time, Hu Jinyao even enjoyed being treated like this by Lu Tongjia. Because in that case, he could slightly reduce the self-blame in his heart. He had never thought that one day, Lu Tongjia would go against Su Qingsang because she didn't like him. Su Qingsang's face was already covered with tears. They were indoors and didn't wear many clothes. She hugged him tightly again. Soon, her tears had soaked his clothes. The wetness on his chest made him lower his head. Because of the pain brought by the memories, his eyes were red. He blinked, as if he could see Su Qingsang's face clearly. He reached out his hand, very slowly, and gently stroked her cheek. "Why are you crying?" Su Qingsang couldn't speak. She could only hug him tightly and keep shaking her head. How could there be such a stupid person? "Don't cry. I'm fine." He had already experienced the pain, and he had already been hurt. It was just that those regrets kept tormenting him, and the self-blame kept tormenting him. He had nowhere to vent those emotions, so he occasionally had nightmares in the middle of the night. "I'm really fine now." Su Qingsang wouldn't believe him. If that was really the case, he wouldn't have been plagued by nightmares for so many years. He wouldn't have called her mother when he was sick. He had grown up, but his feelings were still the same as when he was 12 years old. He was still that teenager. A helpless teenager who was kidnapped, hurt, and hurt. He longed for maternal love and the care from his family. In fact, those were what Lu Tongjia and Hu Mingguang owed him more than 10 years ago. How could Lu Tongjia do that? How could she? Hu Jinyao was also a victim. He also needed Lu Tongjia's gentle words and comfort. He also needed her, as a mother, to bring him out of that pain. But what did Lu Tongjia give him? Suspicion, accusation. And the hatred that had lasted for more than 10 years. Su Qingsang's eyes were blurry from crying. Her heart ached so much that she couldn't breathe. She looked up at Hu Jinyao and kept shaking her head when he said that he was fine. It's not like that. Her voice was trembling and full of tears. She shook her head and hugged him tightly. It's not like that. He wouldn't be fine without the past. How could she do that? How could she? Su Qingsang kept repeating these few words to herself. She wanted to say that Lu Tongjia was wrong. She wanted to say that she should make it up to Hu Jinyao. But she couldn't say it. She could only keep sniffling. Finally, she looked up at Hu Jinyao with a pained face. I'll go talk to her. She let go of him, turned around, and rushed to Lu Tongjia's room. I'll go now. She wanted to make it clear to Lu Tongjia. She had already lost a son and a daughter. Now, did she want to lose another child as well? People's hearts were the easiest to be hurt, and it was difficult to heal after it was hurt. Lu Tongjia was wrong. Since she was wrong, then let her fix this mistake. Hu Jinyao subconsciously grabbed her. When she was about to rush out, he pulled her back into his arms. Don't go. Hu Jinyao. You don't need to say it. Hu Jinyao looked at her face, raised his hand, and used his palm to wipe away the tears on her face little by little. He wiped very, very slowly. He looked at her, and his expression had returned to its usual calmness. There's no need to say it. Hu Jinyao pursed his lips, and his handsome face was indifferent. It's hard for her too. Lu Tongjia's pain was no less than his. It would only be more than his. For so many years, the nightmare had tortured him for as long as it had tortured Lu Tongjia. There had been a time when Lu Tongjia couldn't get out of that nightmare no matter how hard she tried. Every night, she couldn't sleep and woke up with a start. Hu Jinkai and Hu Wushuang were both born after she carried them for 10 months. Especially Hu Wushuang. Her departure was the pain of the entire Hu family. Lu Tongjia's pain was transferred after she misunderstood him. She felt better after she transferred the pain, the anger, and the hatred of loss to him. Hu Jinyao knew that. He knew all that. That was why she didn't want to explain anymore. Let it be. If there had to be someone who had to bear the responsibility for these losses, then let him do it. He owed it to Lu Tongjia. It was all his fault. Su Qingsang's tears were wiped away by Hu Jinyao, but her eyes were still red. She opened her eyes and looked at Hu Jinyao in a daze. Hu Jinyao? I'm really fine. Hu Jinyao didn't know how many times he had said that today. Even though he knew that Su Qingsang wouldn't believe him, even though he knew that he was just lying to himself. Su Qingsang didn't want to argue anymore. She stood on her tiptoes and kissed his lips gently and slowly. She traced the shape of his lips carefully. His lips were very beautiful and sexy. They weren't thick and were slightly thin. Some people used to say that people with thin lips were also thin. But now, she felt that his lips were just right. They were soft and bright red, just like his heart. She kissed him, and tears fell again. Finally, she couldn't kiss him anymore. Tears rolled down her cheeks. She blinked them away and hugged him tightly. Hu Jinyao hugged her as well. The front of his shirt was wet again with her tears. He tightened the grip on his arm. He lowered his head and kissed her forehead, her eyelids, and kissed away all her tears. Finally, he kissed her lips. She stopped at the first touch and hugged him again. They didn't speak again. They just hugged each other like that. Time seemed to stand still. He needed time, and so did she. She slowly calmed herself down. She stopped crying. Her eyes were still swollen. He lowered his head to look at her and sighed softly. It's okay. It's okay. Let's go and wash your face. Apply it to your eyes, or you'll feel uncomfortable later. They were going to have dinner together tonight. If she went with her face like that, she would probably attract attention. Su Qingsang sniffled and nodded heavily. Hua Jinyao held her hand and walked towards the bathroom. Neither of them spoke again. Su Qingsang let him bring a towel, fill it with water, wring it, and gently wipe her face. His movements were very gentle, as if he was wiping some treasure. Su Qingsang blinked. After Hua Jinyao withdrew his hand, she spoke very softly. Hua Jinyao, have you ever thought about leaving the Hua family? Or leaving Tianyu Group? Hua Jinyao stopped wringing the towel. He glanced at her and nodded. Then, it's not that I don't want to. I can't. Old Master Hua knew all about his pain and suffering. Old Master Hua was well aware of Lu Tongjia's pain and suffering. Because Old Master Hua knew and understood. So for so many years, he had never said a word about the relationship between mother and son. Old Master Hua had experienced a lot, so his mentality was different. He was able to accept it, and he could bear more. But other people might not be able to. He understood it all. So, although he felt sorry for Hua Jinyao, he would never let him go. Whether it's the Hua family or Tianyu Group. These are all my responsibilities. If Hua Jinkai were still alive, these would be Hua Jinkai's responsibilities. But Hua Jinkai was gone. His death had a lot to do with him. Even though he had repeatedly told himself that their deaths were accidents, it was useless. Unless, one day, there is someone who can really shoulder these responsibilities. Otherwise, I will continue to carry them. Su Qingsang didn't say anything. She understood him and his choice. However, what about Hua Yifan? Him? Hua Jinyao didn't have a bad impression of Hua Yifan. They used to have a good relationship. But he didn't know when Hua Yifan and the others started to have other thoughts. Not only them, but also the Wei family and even the Lu family. The root cause of all this was Lu Tongjia's undisguised attitude. Hua Jinyao knew that, but because of his tolerance for Lu Tongjia, he had no choice but to tolerate these things as well. Don't worry. He won't be able to do anything. Whether it was him or his older brother in the past. They were all heirs who had been carefully trained by Old Master Hua. In this aspect, Old Master Hua didn't insist on the eldest son and grandson to inherit, nor was he biased. It was because he believed that everyone had different responsibilities to bear. The emphasis he placed on nurturing each of his grandchildren was also different. Hua Yifan wasn't bad, but his weakness was that he was too confident and easily arrogant. With this weakness, Tianyu Group couldn't be expanded in his hands. Therefore, Hua Jinyao would never be a match for him. I know you're better than him. Su Qingsang was worried about other things. But he's with Su Peijian now. I have a feeling that they're not coming with good intentions. Hua Jinyao leaned over and kissed her cheek. Thank you for the compliment, wife. You also said that your husband is better than him. If that's the case, even if Su Peijian is added, so what? Su Qingsang nodded and laughed at herself for thinking too much. Anyway, I don't know much about your business. I can't help much. I just hope that you can be well. Hua Jinyao reached out and rubbed the top of her head. Let's go. You rest for a while. We should have dinner later. When the two of them were about to go downstairs, Su Qingsang glanced at the room next door. Is Uncle Chen okay? To avoid arousing suspicion, she left when the doctors were treating Zhang Yichen. She didn't stay. He's fine. But I don't think he can get up for dinner. It was good that he couldn't get up. Until now, Su Qingsang thought that Zhang Yichen had done that to her because he was drugged and drunk. Only he knew very well that it wasn't the case. The drug had only stimulated the deepest feelings in Zhang Yichen's heart. Zhang Yichen really had feelings for Su Qingsang. However, Hua Jinyao wouldn't tell Su Qingsang about it. He thought about how she had cried for him and how she had wanted to rush to Lu Tongjia to explain for him. His Qingsang was so good. It wasn't surprising that a man liked her. However, he still hoped that there would be fewer rivals in love. Su Qingsang nodded. She sympathized with Lu Tongjia, but she couldn't understand her. If Lu Tongjia really succeeded in framing him, wouldn't it be better to let others know that she had a daughter-in-law who cheated on her husband? Or, did she really hate Hua Jinyao to such an extent? Not only did she want to take away his power in the company, but she also wanted to ruin his reputation. Su Qingsang sighed in her heart. If Lu Tongjia really wanted to do that, if Hua Jinyao stubbornly refused to explain the misunderstanding between them, who could guess what Lu Tongjia would do in the future? Don't worry. Hua Jinyao seemed to know what she was thinking. He suddenly stopped walking. I've already told my mother. She won't do something like that again. Su Qingsang looked at his expressionless face when he said that. She could almost guess Lu Tongjia's expression when he said that. Your mother, I told her that you're my bottom line. There won't be a next time. Su Qingsang pursed her lips, bit her lip, and nodded heavily. She suddenly realized that she loved Hua Jinyao more and more. Other than love, she also felt sorry for him and admired him. No one's son could have done this. But Hua Jinyao did. He had endured a lot that he shouldn't have. He had also experienced a lot that he shouldn't have. The heavens were really too unfair to him. During dinner, several people at the table didn't look good. Hua Jinyao and Su Qingsang didn't need to be mentioned. Although Su Qingsang had a buffer from the previous emotions, she still didn't understand Lu Tongjia's behavior when she saw her again. Lu Tongjia didn't look good either. Hua Mingguang wasn't in the room in the afternoon. She stayed alone the whole afternoon. Hua Jinyao's words still affected her. She didn't cry, but her eyes were a little red, and her face looked a little haggard. If one looked carefully, they would find that she had put on some powder to hide her emotions at the moment. Hua Jinyao didn't look at Lu Tongjia, so he didn't notice the change in her expression. No matter how much Hua Jinyao could bear it, he didn't want to talk to her now. Su Qingsang didn't notice her expression either. She couldn't forgive Lu Tongjia now. Old Master Hua and Hua Mingguang noticed it. However, there were too many relatives today, so it wasn't convenient for them to ask. Hua Mingguang leaned close to Lu Tongjia's ear and spoke softly. If you're tired, go to bed early at night. Everyone is here for dinner. You'd better cheer up. They had been married for many years, so he could tell that she wasn't in a good mood at the moment. Lu Tongjia glanced at her husband and finally responded with a soft hum. She looked exhausted. Su Peijian and Hua Yifan arrived late. Su Peijian's face was rosy. His face was beaming with happiness. Everyone present only thought that Su Peijian and Hua Yifan had a good relationship. But it was different for Nian Chunya. Seeing her appearance, Nian Chunya frowned slightly. She was going to marry her son in the future. No matter how much old Master Hua liked her, she didn't know how to behave and didn't know how to respect her as a mother. That was enough to make her unhappy. Su Peijian didn't care about Nian Chunya's expression. She openly hooked her arm around Hua Yifan's. When she approached the crowd, she looked around and finally fixed her eyes on Su Qingsang's face. Chapter 577. Dinner was not as lively as lunch. Many of them were drunk and could not get up. Zhang Yichen was the most powerful among them. Not only was he drunk, but he was also drugged. Even if the doctor treated him, he wouldn't be able to wake up in a moment or two. Before Hua Yangxiu went downstairs for dinner, she went to check on Zhang Yichen. Of course, she didn't know what Zhang Yichen had just been through. She only thought that he was too happy today and had a few too many drinks. However, Su Peijian knew very well that Zhang Yichen was not drunk at all. Zhang Yichen was upstairs, and Su Qingsang didn't look well. The combination of these phenomena was enough to make Su Peijian wonder what on earth had just happened. A gloating smile appeared on her face. What did Zhang Yichen do? She was starting to get curious. There were fewer people at dinner, but it was still lively. At the dinner table, people were toasting each other, but under the dinner table, people were having different thoughts. Su Qingsang was in no mood to socialize today. All her attention was on Hua Jinyao and Lu Tongjia. She always felt that things shouldn't be like this, and the relationship between mother and son shouldn't be like this. Although she and Li Qianxue weren't together after they met, Li Qianxue's care and love for her had never diminished. He would video call her every day and send her messages frequently. Her words were filled with concern. She understood Li Qianxue's thoughts. She had missed out on the mother-daughter relationship for so many years, and she wanted to make up for it. What about Lu Tongjia? Hua Jinyao had grown up. If Lu Tongjia really wanted to make it up to him, what could she do? More importantly, Lu Tongjia probably wouldn't even think of asking for compensation. She couldn't help but look at Lu Tongjia. She also seemed to be a little distracted. She looked at Hua Jinyao again. At that moment, Hua Jinyao picked up a piece of fish and put it in her bowl. He gave her a look, and she understood what he meant. If she could, she really wanted to clarify things with Lu Tongjia, but Hua Jinyao wouldn't let her. The meal was delicious, but Su Qingsang felt tasteless. She knew it was a dead knot. But she really wanted to untie this knot. While Su Peijian was talking to Hua Yifan, she happened to see Hua Jinyao putting food into Su Qingsang's bowl. She narrowed her eyes. Could it be that Zhang Yichen didn't do what she expected? How could this be? If Zhang Yichen didn't have any medicine, then what she had done today would have been for nothing. She looked down and bit her lip. There was a hint of a cold smile in her beautiful eyes. Zhang Yichen was in the army and rarely came out. Then, what else could she do to get a chance? What if she stayed here tonight? Su Peijian didn't expect that even if she stayed tonight, she wouldn't have a chance. During the Dragon Boat Festival, Li Junsheng also went to Rong City. Hua Jinyao went to the party with them. In the past, he would have asked Zhang Yichen to come along. But not today. Yesterday's incident had created a barrier in his heart. He thought that he might not be able to be as honest with Zhang Yichen as he used to be. The only thing that made Hua Jinyao feel a little better was that Su Qingsang didn't know what Zhang Yichen was thinking. Zhang Yichen woke up the day after the Dragon Boat Festival. He was a soldier and had a strong will. If it wasn't for the special situation yesterday, he would never have allowed himself to make a mistake. He would not allow himself to lose control. But he didn't expect that he would still get drunk despite all his precautions. Forget about getting drunk. How could he lose control? Zhang Yichen rubbed his temples. There was a part of his memory that he didn't remember yesterday. But there was a part that was especially clear. He thought that he was hallucinating when he was hugging a woman and hugging Hua Jinyao when he was drunk. At that moment, he could only feel lucky that he didn't lose control in front of Su Qingsang. He didn't know that he had already lost control in front of Su Qingsang. He didn't know that he had already lost control in front of Su Qingsang. Fortunately, Su Qingsang knew that he was drugged and drunk. Zhang Yichen didn't know that he was drugged. He only knew that he was drunk. He could hold his liquor well. In the past, when he was drunk, he only slept. That was why he could drink without worry. But why did he lose control yesterday? Zhang Yichen didn't understand, but he was sure of one thing. Hua Jinyao, he knew. He buried his face in his palms. He wanted to keep it a secret. What should he do now? Su Peijian didn't look very good after leaving the Hua mansion. Su Qingsang didn't stay at the Hua mansion yesterday. She left with Hua Jinyao after dinner. Seeing how Hua Jinyao cared for her when she left, Su Peijian knew that what Zhang Yichen did yesterday didn't affect her at all. That made her very unhappy. Her plan failed. She didn't know when she would get another chance like this. She was very anxious about this, and it was easy to see how she felt. Her expression was so obvious that even Hua Yifan noticed it. What's wrong? Nothing. Su Peijian didn't want to tell Hui Yifan that she had set Zhang Yichen up. She knew very well that if she told Hui Yifan about it, he would probably object because of Hui Yangxiu's relationship with old Master Hua. My intuition tells me that the bad thing you wanted to do just now failed. Isn't that right? Hui Yifan was a smart man. He knew from Su Peijian's expression that her plan must have failed. He curled his lips and smiled wickedly. Don't tell me that you tried to set Su Qingsang up today and failed. Yes, I failed. Su Peijian curled her lips and said coldly, you should be disappointed that I failed. What do you mean by gloating like that? Nothing. Hui Yifan pulled her into his arms and said, you should have told me that you tried to set Su Qingsang up in the Hua mansion. This is the Hua mansion, after all. Hua Jinyao is there, so you have no chance. No matter how much Auntie doesn't like Su Qingsang, she won't let you do anything. You know, this is a very embarrassing thing to do. Su Peijian didn't say anything. In fact, she just wanted to embarrass Su Qingsang and let Hua Jinyao know that he had been cheated on. Today's plan was a little rushed. If she was more familiar with the Hua mansion and had more opportunities, she believed that she would succeed. Alright, don't think about it. You know how protective Hua Jinyao is of Su Qingsang. If you want to set her up again, you'd better do it when he's not here. Of course, it would be easier to do it outside the Hua mansion. Su Peijian narrowed her eyes and began to seriously consider the feasibility of this matter. However, there was no hurry. There were more important things to do now. Alright, I will deal with Su Qingsang. You should focus on the company. We can't lose this time. Don't worry. Don't you trust me? Hui Yifan laughed arrogantly. He thought that all his actions were secret and no one would notice. Su Peijian didn't like his smug look. Part of her personality was like Su Qinghui's. She liked to think more about things. She always had a feeling that things wouldn't be as simple as Hui Yifan thought. However, seeing his confident look, Su Peijian didn't want to hurt him. She turned over and fell asleep. When she got up in the morning, she met Lu Tongjia and found that she didn't look good. Su Peijian had wanted to cooperate with her before. However, there was no opportunity to cooperate now. She naturally thought that Lu Tongjia was giving her a hard time. This made Su Peijian's mood even worse. When she got home, Xiang Kaiping was reading the newspaper in the living room. When she saw her come in, she looked up at her with a very complicated expression. Mom, I'm home. Su Peijian changed her shoes and sat down on the sofa opposite Xiang Kaiping. There were fruits on the table. They were all washed. She picked up a bunch of grapes and ate too. When she found that Xiang Kaiping was still looking at her, she sat up uncomfortably. What's wrong? Mom? Have you had breakfast? I haven't eaten yet. Can you see if there's anything to eat? Ms. Zhao is in the kitchen. You can ask her. Xiang Kaiping glanced at her. She still couldn't ask the question that was on the tip of her tongue. Su Peijian went to the kitchen to find something to eat without noticing. Xiang Kaiping looked at her back with an indecipherable expression. When Su Peijian came out, she found that Xiang Kaiping was no longer in the living room. She was more or less relieved. When she was with Li Qianxue, Li Qianxue always went along with her. Of course, if she did something wrong, Li Qianxue would also blame her. She would tell her what not to do. However, ever since she met Xiang Kaiping, she was always a little afraid of her. Su Peijian understood that it was because Xiang Kaiping didn't want to lose her daughter, so she always went along with her. She enjoyed this feeling. In her opinion, Xiang Kaiping would never leave her or betray her. After all, they were blood relatives. She believed that Xiang Kaiping would never leave her. It could only be said that Su Peijian was too confident. After returning to her room, Xiang Kaiping locked the door and walked to the table in the room. She opened the lock of the last drawer and took out a photo album. When she was young, she didn't like taking photos very much. Therefore, there weren't many photos. The album was still the ones she had taken when she lived with Su Qingsang. There were also some photos of her and Su Qingsang. There were also photos with Hua Jinyao. At the end of the album, there was a photo she had clipped after she came back. That photo was taken when the child was born. She didn't know what she was thinking, but she asked the nurse to take a photo of the child. She looked at the child back then and thought about Su Peijian now. Xiang Kaiping couldn't tell how she felt. She turned the page and looked at the photo of her and Su Qingsang again. At that time, her smile was real. She was also in a good mood. But now, she couldn't think about it. Xiang Kaiping felt sad when she thought about it. She felt that she really didn't know how to vent the anger in her heart, nor did she know how to relieve her depression. Previously, when she was with Su Qingsang, she even gave up being with Hua Jinyao to accompany her to Japan for New Year's. Later, in order to take care of herself, she didn't go back to Rome City with Hua Jinyao for New Year's. Su Qingsang knew how many rules there were in a big family like the Hua family. But she still did that. Now, Su Peijian had nothing to do, but she ran out early and stayed outside for a day. She didn't even call. She didn't tell her where she went, nor did she tell her what she was busy with that day. Yesterday was the Dragon Boat Festival. Even though this festival wasn't like the Spring Festival or the Mid-Autumn Festival, which focused on family reunion. But at this time, Xiang Kaiping was still disappointed. Su Peijian really didn't care about her mother. She closed the photo album and locked it back in the bottom drawer. There was no longer any joy on her face. What was she going to do with this daughter of hers? Hua Jinyao was listening to Yang Wenchang talk about Hua Yifan's movements these days. From the looks of it, his plan was going well. Because Hua Yifan didn't suspect anything and trusted them. He curled the corners of his mouth, and there was a faint smile in his eyes. This was one of the few things that had put him in a good mood recently. Keep watching him. I believe he'll take the bait soon. Yang Wenchang nodded and was about to leave. The intercom rang. Someone was looking for Hua Jinyao. It had been a few days since Hua Jinyao saw Zhang Yichen again. He wasn't disheveled like he was on the day of the Dragon Boat Festival, nor was he blushing like that night. He stood there as straight as a pine tree. Hua Jinyao narrowed his eyes. He didn't miss the trace of guilt that flashed across Zhang Yichen's eyes. Uncle, you're here. He didn't rush to get up when he saw Zhang Yichen like before. He pressed the intercom and asked someone to bring tea. After the secretary left, he gestured for Zhang Yichen to sit down. Zhang Yichen didn't sit down. He still stood there. I thought Uncle had returned to the army. Why haven't you gone back? I went back, but I'm back. What's the matter? Hua Jinyao was much calmer than before, which was enough to explain the problem. Zhang Yichen knew that Hua Jinyao already knew, but he still couldn't say it. That day, I'm sorry. I was drunk. Zhang Yichen's voice was soft, but he didn't mean to excuse himself. That day? Uncle, which day are you talking about? Hua Jinyao didn't seem to understand. He turned to look at Zhang Yichen with a puzzled expression. Zhang Yichen stood even straighter than before. He slightly clenched his fists by his sides, then quickly loosened them. That day of the Dragon Boat Festival was wrong. Uncle, you said you were drunk. Since you were drunk, I won't take it seriously. Zhang Yichen looked at him and took a step forward. I didn't come here today to cover up or anything else. I just want to say that it's just me. Su Qingsang doesn't know, so you. Uncle. Hua Jinyao abruptly stood up. He walked around his gigantic desk and walked up to Zhang Yichen step by step, then stood still. What are you trying to say? I just want to tell you that Su Qingsang doesn't know. No matter what you heard that day, or what you know, it's just me. Uncle. Once again, Hua Jinyao interrupted him. His expression was cold, and his eyes were even colder. Are you explaining for Su Qingsang? I don't want you to misunderstand. I didn't misunderstand. You, on the other hand, if you continue to explain, I will really misunderstand. Hua Jinyao's eyes were sharp, and his expression was serious. Uncle, I have always respected you, both in the past and now. But this time, I don't think you need to explain. He took a step forward, almost standing next to Zhang Yichen. Their bodies were very close to each other. They were both tall and imposing. Zhang Yichen had the sharpness of a soldier, while Hua Jinyao had the aura of a leader for many years. The two of them looked at each other. For some reason, there was a feeling of sparks flying in the air. Hua Jinyao raised his chin and looked at Zhang Yichen with a very sharp look. Uncle, you don't need to explain what you're thinking. As for Su Qingsang, you don't need to explain for her. She is my wife. I trust her. I trust her. Just as I am willing to respect Uncle's character. I've already forgotten what happened that day. You were just drunk. So, you should forget it too. Zhang Yichen pressed his lips into a straight line and looked at Hua Jinyao. You know how much I can drink. I've never been drunk before. It was an accident. So, as you said, I will forget it. For so many years, every step that Zhang Yichen took was within his plan. However, he never thought that he would encounter something that was not part of his plan. That was Su Qingsang's existence. He tried his best to control himself, but he didn't expect that he would break his plan without even knowing it. Not only did he let Hua Jinyao know what he was thinking, but also, Hua Jinyao didn't answer him. He just stared at Zhang Yichen's face for a while, then said in a low voice. Although what happened that day was an accident, I think you shouldn't come to the Hua family again if you don't have anything else to do. Zhang Yichen suddenly raised his head to look at Hua Jinyao. He looked shocked and hurt. Uncle, you think you can drink well, but is your tolerance for drugs as well? What do you mean? Nothing. Hua Jinyao's voice was flat. Uncle, you keep saying that you got drunk by accident. That's why you lost control. But what you don't know is that someone drugged the soup that I gave you that day. It was because of the drug that Uncle lost his composure. Someone drugged me? Zhang Yichen had never thought of that possibility. After all, when he woke up, Hua Jinyao and Su Qingsang had already left. The doctor wasn't there, and Lu Tongjia couldn't have told him about it. No one knew that Zhang Yichen had been drugged, except for Su Qingsang and the others. Yes. Uncle, you were drugged, and under the influence of the drug, you lost control. Who? Zhang Yichen didn't look happy. He didn't expect to encounter such a thing in the Hua family. It doesn't matter who drugged you. Hua Jinyao looked at him with a serious expression. What matters is why that person drugged you. Jinyao? Uncle, have you ever thought about it? You think that you're hiding your feelings well. But what if someone saw through it? Not only did that person see through it, but he also took advantage of it. In fact, the person who he wanted to hurt might not be you, but Su Qingsang. Chapter 578. Hua Jinyao's voice was cold. He had never talked to Zhang Yichen like that. In fact, Zhang Yichen was innocent of what had happened that day. He knew it. He couldn't help but wonder how Lu Tongjia knew what Zhang Yichen was thinking. Zhang Yichen must have revealed something to him when he wasn't aware of it. When he wasn't aware of it, where he couldn't see it. Zhang Yichen and Su Qingsang had shared intimate moments, and Lu Tongjia happened to see them doing that. Thinking of that, Hua Jinyao felt very uncomfortable. He wasn't a stingy man, especially since Zhang Yichen wasn't only his uncle. To Hua Jinyao, Zhang Yichen was both a teacher and a friend. Zhang Yichen was very important to him. He had never thought that one day, his relationship with Zhang Yichen would become like this. He felt sad, and his voice became colder. Uncle, have you ever thought about how much trouble you've caused Su Qingsang? If Su Qingsang hadn't escaped in time yesterday? If the person who drugged you had called a group of people to watch? If you and Su Qingsang had been caught red-handed. Thinking of that, Hua Jinyao felt suffocated. Even if he was willing to trust Su Qingsang, even if he was willing to stand behind her, what would Su Qingsang face in the future? Uncle, you can argue with me, but what about Su Qingsang? Don't forget that she's your niece. Zhang Yichen stood there with his back straight. He didn't move an inch. He couldn't refute Hua Jinyao's accusation. I didn't do anything intimate with her. I just saw her in the back garden twice. Maybe someone saw us. Zhang Yichen looked at Hua Jinyao as he said that. I'm sorry, I'll be more careful in the future. But I don't think the Hua family is as peaceful as you think. He could roughly guess who was targeting Hua Jinyao. He believed that Hua Jinyao knew it himself. That's my business. You don't have to worry about it. Hua Jinyao couldn't tell Zhang Yichen that it was Lu Tongjia who did it. No matter how bad Lu Tongjia was, she was his biological mother. Even if he didn't say anything, Zhang Yichen had his own guesses. But now there was no need to say anything more. He took a step back. Yes. I don't have to worry about the rest. Today, he seemed to have come with the purpose of explaining. But now, he felt as if he had made a wasted trip. If there's nothing else, I'll be leaving first. Zhang Yichen looked at him and added, as if he was worried that Zhang Yichen might be worried. When I returned to the army a few days ago, I agreed to carry out a mission. He wouldn't come back to Rome City anytime soon. You can rest assured. Uncle, you're mistaken. I have nothing to worry about. Zhang Yichen looked a little bitter. That was right. Their relationship as husband and wife was very good, so there was really nothing to worry about. He turned around and left. His footsteps were no lighter than when he came. As he reached the door, he paused. Jinyao, sometimes, I really envy you. You're really lucky. Not everyone had the chance to meet a woman as smart and special as Su Qingsang. Thank you. I also think my luck is pretty good. Hua Jinyao admitted it openly. Half a year ago, if he hadn't suddenly appeared in the hospital where Su Qingsang was in. If he hadn't stopped and watched the fun. He believed that he wouldn't have such good luck now. Zhang Yichen left with a bitter look on his face. Yes. Not everyone could have good luck. It could be encountered, but not sought. Su Qingsang's smiling face appeared in his mind. Zhang Yichen closed his eyes and suppressed that thought deeper into his heart. Su Qingsang looked at Hua Jinyao, who had left her body. He was much more excited today than usual. It felt like when they had just started their relationship. His attitude was even a little urgent. She hadn't seen Hua Jinyao like this in the past few months. Jinyao? She wanted to ask him if something had happened in the company again, or if Lu Tongjia had done something again. However, Hua Jinyao had already turned over again and kissed her lips. He hugged her tightly, brought her into his arms, and did it with her again. Her body moved up and down with him involuntarily. She endured everything he gave her. He was a little forceful. He rubbed her hard into his arms, lowered his head, and kept his lips on her lips and ears. Honey, you are mine. Honey. Honey. Tell me that you are mine. Honey, do you feel it? I am the one with you now. Before Su Qingsang could give any response, he kissed her lips and whispered in her ear. Honey, tell me, who am I? Hua Jinyao. Su Qingsang had to clench her teeth to say those 3 words. She was losing consciousness. The hair on her forehead was already wet with sweat. She felt a little overwhelmed by Hua Jinyao like this. Honey. Who is Hua Jinyao? Su Qingsang felt as if her sanity had flown beyond the highest heavens. The feeling he gave her was too strong. She had always needed time to get used to it. She didn't expect Hua Jinyao to ask such a question at this time. Hua Jinyao, it's you. Yes, my husband. Hua Jinyao was satisfied. Over and over again, he made Su Qingsang say what he wanted to hear. Until she couldn't take it anymore. Exhausted, she fainted in the pleasure he brought her. Hua Jinyao carried her to clean up and change the bedsheets while she was in the shower. Finally, he cleaned Su Qingsang and carried her back to the room. Su Qingsang recovered a little. She wanted to say something, but Hua Jinyao hugged her tightly. Sorry. I lost control today. He shouldn't have lost control like that. At least, since he trusted Su Qingsang, he shouldn't be so worried. However, Zhang Yichen's words and Lu Tongjia knew about her ambiguous relationship with Zhang Yichen. He couldn't help but want some reassurance from Su Qingsang. Even if such a reassurance was only his one-sided thought. Su Qingsang's hands and feet were weak. She looked at Hua Jinyao and shook her head gently. I'm fine. What's wrong with you? Hua Jinyao carefully held her body in his arms and didn't say anything. Zhang Yichen returned to the army today. In fact, after the two of them had finished their conversation in the office, he had left. He knew that Zhang Yichen was a man of his word. Since he said that he wouldn't return to Rome City in the near future, it meant that he wouldn't show up for a long time. However, his absence didn't mean that Zhang Yichen didn't have feelings for Su Qingsang. It was just that he might suppress his feelings deeper and harsher. From his original point of view, he couldn't blame Zhang Yichen. There was nothing wrong with liking someone. Zhang Yichen only liked one person. However, from the perspective of Su Qingsang's husband, Hua Jinyao couldn't ignore it. Someone coveted your wife. That didn't feel good. Now, someone knew about it, and it was Lu Tongjia. Lu Tongjia had been quite quiet these days. Hua Jinyao didn't know if his words worked, or if Lu Tongjia had been seen through and hadn't thought of a new way to deal with Su Qingsang. Either way, he believed that it was only temporary. Given Lu Tongjia's resentment, it was very likely that she would come back in a few days when she was in a bad mood. If Zhang Yichen hadn't given up by then and didn't restrain himself. They were relatives after all. If that happened, Lu Tongjia would probably do something. After all, she didn't like him in the first place. Now that Su Qingsang was involved, she hated him even more. If she really ignored his warning and insisted on telling the truth about Su Qingsang and Zhang Yichen, what would he do? After all, Lu Tongjia was his mother. Hua Jinyao calmed his frown and hugged Su Qingsang's waist tightly. Go to sleep. Jinyao. Don't worry. It's not a big deal. I'll take care of it. He thought that he might need to talk to Lu Tongjia again. Or, did he need to do more to ensure that Su Qingsang wouldn't be hurt by Lu Tongjia? Su Qingsang raised her head to look at him. She didn't miss the complicated emotions that flashed through his eyes. She couldn't help but think of Lu Tongjia. Maybe she could do something. Su Qingsang hung up the phone. After making sure that Su Peijian wasn't at home, she knocked on the door. She did this every time she came to see Xiang Kaiping. In fact, she wasn't afraid that Su Peijian would find out or see her. It was just that it was better to have less trouble than more trouble. Ms. Zhao. It was Ms. Zhao who opened the door. Su Qingsang had come a few times, so she knew her. Hello, Miss Su. Ms. Zhao was all smiles when she saw Su Qingsang. She liked Su Qingsang. She was very polite and knowledgeable. Most of all, she was willing to spend time with them, the older people. This was something that was hard to come by. Ms. Zhao. Xiang Kaiping stood up from the sofa after entering the room. Ms. Zhao, this is the physical therapy device you asked for last time. I brought it here for you. Su Qingsang put a big box on the coffee table. She turned to look at Ms. Zhao. She had wanted to visit Xiang Kaiping during the Dragon Boat Festival, but she went to the Hua family and that incident happened. Although Hua Jinyao hadn't mentioned it in the past few days, she believed that what Lu Tongjia had done must have affected him. Thank you, Miss Su. You're so considerate. Ms. Zhao stepped forward and kept thanking her. How much is it? I'll give you the money. No need. Su Qingsang waved her hand. It's not that much. I'll give it to you. How can I accept it? I'm embarrassed to see you like this. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. Su Qingsang glanced at Xiang Kaiping as she spoke. I've been busy with work recently, so I may not have time to visit you often. Please take good care of her. Of course, of course. I'm paid. Ms. Zhao looked at the physical therapy device and felt very embarrassed. Thank you. You're welcome. We have internal discounts. It's not too expensive. Ms. Zhao scratched her head. I'll accept it then. Thank you, Miss Su. You're welcome. Miss Su, why don't you stay for dinner today? I bought some groceries. You can leave after dinner. Okay. Su Qingsang agreed and glanced at Xiang Kaiping again. If she stayed for dinner, then Su Peijian, she's busy today. She won't be back. Xiang Kaiping knew what she was thinking. She watched Su Qingsang and Ms. Zhao talk without interrupting. Qingsang, I asked Ms. Zhao to buy some bamboo leaves. Although the Dragon Boat Festival is over, if you have nothing to do, let's make some rice dumplings. Okay. Su Qingsang nodded. I haven't made rice dumplings yet. Auntie, you can teach me. Okay. Xiang Kaiping smiled. In fact, she had bought the bamboo leaves before. She had thought that if Su Peijian was at home that day, she would make rice dumplings for her. Who knew that Su Peijian would stay out for the whole day? Even at home, she didn't have much patience to keep her company. A few days ago, she had wanted to ask her to spend more time with her. Recently, she didn't want to mention it anymore. Because Su Peijian seemed to be busier than before. She sighed in her heart. Xiang Kaiping forced herself to shift her attention away from Su Peijian. In fact, the bamboo leaves were already prepared, and so were the ingredients for the glutinous rice. She knew that Su Qingsang would come today, so she wanted to make rice dumplings with her. Even though the festival was over, she believed that Su Qingsang wouldn't refuse. Su Qingsang didn't refuse. Compared to her, Su Peijian seemed. Xiang Kaiping shook her head. She really envied Li Qinxue. She had such a good daughter. Su Qingsang was halfway through making the rice dumplings when she thought about Lu Tongjia. She believed that before the incident with the Hua family, Lu Tongjia must have had some warmth for Hua Jinyao. But that warmth disappeared in the end. If she could restore the warmth between Lu Tongjia and Hua Jinyao, would Lu Tongjia forgive Hua Jinyao's impulsive mistake when he was 12 years old? Moreover, it wasn't a mistake, but a misunderstanding. If the misunderstanding could be resolved, Qingsang, do you have something else to do? No. Su Qingsang stopped thinking, smiled at Xiang Kaiping, and continued to make rice dumplings. If you have something to do, go do your own thing. You don't have to come to see me. Xiang Kaiping was serious. As an outsider, Su Qingsang had done a lot. Auntie, I'm fine. She was just thinking about Lu Tongjia. Xiang Kaiping didn't really believe her, but since she said she was fine, she couldn't continue to ask. After all, they were no longer mother and daughter. She couldn't control her too much. Xiang Kaiping didn't stop wrapping the rice dumplings. She thought about it and said, You have Hua Jinyao to take care of you. I have nothing to say. But if you have something on your mind, if you want to, I can't help you. But I can still be a listener. Su Qingsang was touched by Xiang Caiping's words. Su Qingsang suddenly had an idea because of Xiang Caiping's words. She also knew what she could do. People get along with each other, but people's hearts changed. Now Lu Tongjia misunderstood Hua Jinyao. Hua Jinyao didn't want to explain. If she explained, she would be exonerating Hua Jinyao. It was better to find another way. Think of other ways to move Lu Tongjia. If Lu Tongjia was soft-hearted, she would naturally believe what she said. She needed to think about how to soften Lu Tongjia's attitude. When Hua Jinyao returned home and was about to eat, he saw the rice dumplings on the dining table. He couldn't help but look at Su Qingsang. The Dragon Boat Festival is over. Where did the rice dumplings come from? Although rice dumplings were usually sold, this one didn't look like it was sold on the street. Because it wasn't a square rice dumpling, but a triangular one. Few people in the north made rice dumplings like this, but many people in the south like to make small triangular rice dumplings like this. Guess. Su Qingsang was still unfamiliar with it at first, but after trying a few times, she got the hang of it. Now that she saw Hua Jinyao, she couldn't help but want to take credit. Don't tell me you made this? Half. You and Auntie Yu? As far as he knew, Auntie Yu was from the north, so she probably didn't know how to make triangular rice dumplings like this. No. Su Qingsang smiled, took his hand, and led him to sit down at the dining table. Come, let me tell you first. The red string is a sweet rice dumpling. The white string is a salty rice dumpling. The sweet one is wrapped with dates and peanuts. The salty one is egg yolk and meat dumpling. So many? Yes. Su Qingsang nodded and sat down next to Hua Jinyao. I'm off today, so I went to see Auntie. Hua Jinyao paused in his action of taking the rice dumplings. Did you make them with Auntie Xiang? Yes. Then, didn't you just stay at Auntie's for a day? Yes. Su Qingsang looked at Hua Jinyao and knew that he was worried about her. Don't worry. I didn't meet Su Peijian. Auntie Xiang said that she looked very busy recently. She's always not at home. Of course she was busy. He had set a trap for Hui Yifan, and Hui Yifan had already fallen into it. Su Peijian was worried and wanted to keep an eye on many things herself. Hui Yifan couldn't let others know that he still worked in Tianyu every day. In this way, his energy would definitely be divided. That was why Su Peijian represented Hui Yifan in many things. She was becoming more and more like that. Many people who had interacted with Hui Yifan in private admired Su Peijian. Many people were also asking about Su Peijian's background. Hua Jinyao couldn't help but glance at Su Qingsang. If Su Qingsang hadn't been the wrong child, if Li Qianxue and Su Qinghui had carefully cultivated her, would she have shown such talent in business like Su Peijian? Su Qingsang didn't know what Hua Jinyao was thinking. She thought that he was worried about her. She picked up a salty rice dumpling and put it in his hand. Okay. I call Auntie every time I go. I only go when I'm sure that Su Peijian is not there. So I won't meet her. Besides, even if I meet her, so what? She also knows that I lived with Auntie before. I'm not afraid of her knowing that she saw me. If she really doesn't like me visiting Auntie, she should be nicer to Auntie. I heard from Auntie Zhao that she often doesn't go home to eat or even stay at home. Chapter 579. She only promised to go less, but she didn't promise not to go anymore. Xiang Kaiping was not in a good state at the moment. She was indeed a little worried. As for Su Peijian, Su Qingsang really didn't take her seriously. Hua Jinyao took the rice dumpling from her hand and pinched her nose with the other hand. You. I only said one sentence, but you said so many. When did I stop you from going? I just don't think Su Peijian is a good person. I don't want you to go against her. It was no coincidence that Su Peijian was with Hui Yifan. It was premeditated. I know. Don't worry, I'll be careful. Hua Jinyao nodded, peeled the rice dumpling, and took a bite. Then he nodded. It tastes good. Of course, it's not like you don't know that Auntie's cooking has always been very good. After Su Qingsang said this, there was a touch of sadness in her eyes. The time when she and Xiang Kaiping were as close as mother and daughter would never come back. Yes. I know Auntie is good at cooking. Hua Jinyao got rid of the rice dumpling. He took out a tissue and wiped his hands. He thought of something else. You didn't tell Auntie that Su Peijian is with Hui Yifan, did you? No. Su Qingsang shook her head. I don't know what to say. If you didn't say it, then don't say it. Sometimes, ignorance was bliss. Su Peijian and Xiang Kaiping were just friends. If Xiang Kaiping found out that Su Peijian was with Hui Yifan, her cousin, again, she would be in trouble. Needless to say, Xiang Kaiping could guess that there was something fishy going on. At that time, something might happen again. I know my limits. Don't worry. Of course, Hu Jinyao trusted Su Qingsang, but he didn't trust Su Peijian. Recently, she had been doing a lot of things, but they were all related to work. In private, he did not hear Yang Wenchang say that she had done anything. He didn't know if Su Peijian wanted to take a different approach, or was she so confident that she could defeat him in business. No matter which one it was, he would let Yang Wenchang keep an eye on her. He didn't want to give her a chance to hurt Su Qingsang. Su Peijian came home early today. Xiang Kaiping was surprised. Apart from being surprised, a trace of guilt flashed across his face. After changing into her shoes, Su Peijian looked up and saw the guilty look on Xiang Caiping's face. She squinted her eyes and twitched her nose. Suddenly, the corners of his lips curled up. It smells so good. What's that smell? I made zongzi today. As Xiang Kaiping spoke, she got up and went to the kitchen. He took out a few zongzi. This is sweet, and this is salty. I don't know what you like to eat. Have a taste. Why did you suddenly think of making zongzi? Su Peijian looked at Xiang Kaiping. She was not in a hurry to eat the rice dumplings. She was quite surprised. Isn't the Dragon Boat Festival over? Yes, I have. Xiang Kaiping glanced at her. This time, there was no trace of guilt on her face. Last time during the festival, I was thinking that if you were at home, we could make dumplings together. But you are not at home. A few days had passed. I'm afraid that if I don't eat it, the bamboo leaves will spoil and become unusable. Was she blaming him? Su Peijian picked up one of the zongzi and played with it in her palm, but she did not eat it. Mom. I don't really like eating these. You can do whatever you want next time. Eat whatever you want. Don't wait for me. Xiang Kaiping looked at her in a daze. Finally, she lowered her head under Su Peijian's indifferent gaze. I got it. But I'll eat this today. Su Peijian raised the sweet zongzi in her hand, waved it, and got up to go upstairs. Xiang Kaiping looked at her from behind. Her lips moved, but in the end, she could not stop her. Su Peijian returned to her room, but she did not eat the zongzi. Instead, she turned on her computer and clicked on one of the apps. Soon, she saw the entire situation in the villa. Not only the small garden outside, but also the living room, dining room, kitchen, and Xiang Caiping's in her own room. She pulled up the surveillance footage. Su Peijian quickly saw it. The screen showed the image. Su Qingsang was here. No wonder she said that Xiang Kaiping wanted to make zongzi out of nothing. She said that she wanted to make zongzi for her a few days ago, but she was not at home. So it was because of Su Qingsang. Why did she say it was for her? Su Peijian looked at the zongzi. No matter how she looked at it, she did not like it. She did not like to eat things that were too difficult to digest and high in calories. But that did not mean that she would allow Xiang Kaiping to please Su Qingsang if she did not like it. Looking at Su Qingsang and Xiang Kaiping making zongzi in front of the dining table, talking and laughing, as if they were mother and daughter, Su Peijian felt disgusted. Su Qingsang, you have already taken Li Qinxue, and now you are not letting Xiang Kaiping go? You're currying favor like this. Why? Do you think you can please both mothers? Su Peijian felt that she could not take it. She really wanted to do something to make Su Qingsang unhappy. However, she heard that Zhang Yichen had returned to the army. And he would not come to Rome City for a while. If she found another man to prove her relationship with Su Qingsang, Hua Jinyao would not believe her. Not only would she say it, but it was very likely to alarm Hua Jinyao and let him know about her recent actions. Su Peijian stared at the screen for a long time, and finally, she suddenly smiled. Su Qingsang, Su Qingsang. You want to please both sides, don't you? Then I will let you please both sides. I would like to see, with Li Qinshue's personality, whether she will allow you to please both sides like this or not. Su Peijian opened the software again and quickly typed on the keyboard. The Li family in Lin City. Li Qinsue returned home and sat directly on the sofa. She had a social engagement today. In the past, these were all attended by Su Chenghui. However, during the period when she and Su Chenghui divorced in January, she had to start attending these social engagements no matter how much she disliked it. Qinsue. Did you drink again? Old Master Li came downstairs and saw Li Qinshue's red face. He then smelled the faint smell of alcohol on her and naturally knew that she had gone to a social engagement. A little. Dad. Don't worry, I am not drunk. Li Qinsue sat up straight, her eyes clear, and she did not seem drunk. She really could not refuse, so she drank a little, but she was not drunk. She knew how to behave. Old Master Li's eyes were a little distressed. He looked at Li Qinsue, wanting to say something but hesitating. Qinsue? What's wrong? Dad, I am really not drunk. Li Qinsue blinked at Old Master Li as she spoke. Look, I am very sober now, am I not? Qinsue. I heard that Su Chenghui, he. Dad. As soon as Li Qinsue heard Su Chenghui's name, her expression changed. If you want me to get back together with Su Chenghui, you don't have to say it. She hated Su Chenghui so much that it was impossible for her to have anything to do with him again. Old Master Li knew that his daughter had a clear distinction between love and hate. He sighed in his heart. I am not saying that you should get back together with him. I heard that he opened a small company outside. He seems to be doing a good job. I just feel sorry for you. Let's not talk about other things first. Su Chenghui is indeed very capable, Dad. No matter how capable he is, I have already divorced him. He is no longer the son-in-law of the Li family. Li Qinsue had met Su Chenghui a few times in the past 2 months. He seemed to be doing quite well and was not affected by the divorce at all. Opening a company was good enough. She knew that he was capable. They had both decided that they would have nothing to do with each other in the future. She would not let Su Chenghui enter her life again. Old Master Li's lips moved, but in the end, he did not try to persuade her anymore. Li Qinshue's mood was a little affected. After sitting for a while, she went upstairs. After taking a shower, Li Qinsue looked at the empty room where she was alone and sat down on the sofa. She also knew that she had lost her composure today. But she couldn't control herself. She didn't think that she had been really tired recently. How miserable she had been. In fact, she had been through the most exhausting and embarrassing times. When those people in Lin City knew that Su Chenghui had opened a company outside, the way they looked at her made her feel uneasy. Now, she had walked out of it. She used to think that she would love Su Chenghui for the rest of her life until she died. But reality gave her a loud slap in the face. For a man who did not love her, stopping the loss in time was the wisest choice. If she really chose to continue to endure, then she might be able to relax for a while, but she would definitely be in pain for the rest of her life. However, thinking of Su Chenghui, she couldn't help but think of Su Chenghui's expression when he saw her the last few times. His face was eager, and when he looked at her, it was as if he had 1,000 words to say. If Li Qinsue hadn't already seen through Su Chenghui, she might have taken what he had said seriously. She really thought that he had feelings for her. Unfortunately, she had already been fooled once. She wouldn't believe him at all. The most likely reason was that Su Qinghui's new company was not running smoothly, and he wanted to borrow the Li Corporation's popularity. Li Qianxue found that since she divorced Su Qinghui, she would always use the greatest malice to guess his thoughts. She would always think of Su Qinghui as hateful. Very bad. She knew that this was because her trust in Su Qinghui had been shattered and no longer existed. But this was what she was willing to see. Now, it was very good. She would definitely work hard and prove that even without Su Qinghui, she, Li Qianxue, could still live a good life and run the Li Corporation well. Li Qianxue rubbed her eyebrows and planned to go to sleep. Before going to bed, she habitually looked at her schedule for tomorrow. Before she finished looking through it, an email notification popped up in her mailbox. She had 2 mailboxes, one for work and one for private. This was her private mailbox. Not many people knew about it. When she opened it, it was an unsigned email. There was a video inside. Li Qianxue wasn't in a hurry to open it. She looked at the unfamiliar mailbox, turned her finger, and was about to delete the email. However, when she clicked to confirm, she hesitated again. After thinking for a while, she opened the video. Soon, Li Qianxue sat up straight. Her eyes were fixed on the screen. Chapter 580. Su Qingsang came out of the operating room and changed her clothes. When he returned to his office, he found several missed calls on his cell phone, all from Li Qianxue. She frowned slightly. Li Qianxue rarely called her during work hours. He called back and found that Li Qianxue's phone was turned off. Su Qingsang became more and more confused. Su Qingsang didn't get through to Li Qianxue's phone even when it was lunchtime. She had an operation in the afternoon. Su Qingsang thought for a while. He sent a message to Li Qianxue. Then, he told her roughly what time he could finish the surgery. When Su Qingsang finished her afternoon surgery and was about to call Li Qianxue again, her phone rang. Mom? Su Qingsang breathed a sigh of relief when she received Li Qianxue's call. Were you busy just now? I called you, but your cell phone is off. What did you say? Are you in Rong City? Su Qingsang was stunned. For a moment, she thought she had misheard. Where are you now? Outside my hospital. Wait a moment, I'll be off work soon. I'm coming. Su Qingsang hung up the phone as fast as she could. She told the nurse to pay attention to the condition of the previous patient, then hurriedly picked up her bag and phone and rushed out of the hospital. Li Qianxue sat on a bench on the lawn of the hospital. She sat very upright, looking at an unknown point with a solemn expression on her face. Mom. Mom? Su Qingsang stepped forward and called Li Qianxue twice before Li Qianxue raised her head to look at her. Qingsang? Mom. Why are you here? Why didn't you tell me? What Li Qianxue did next shocked her. When she saw Su Qingsang, she stood up and hugged her tightly. Su Qingsang's body suddenly froze. She almost dropped her handbag. Li Qianxue hugged her so tightly that Su Qingsang felt a little uncomfortable. Mom? Su Qingsang tried calling him again. Li Qianxue still did not respond. Li Qianxue hugged him a little tightly. She couldn't describe how she felt when she saw those videos last night. At first, he was angry. Then, he was furious. But after calming down, she watched the video again. She found that she could not be angry, nor could she be angry. She knew that Su Qingsang and Xiang Kaiping had once mistaken each other for mother and daughter. However, she did not know that after Su Qingsang acknowledged her, she would still be in contact with Xiang Kaiping. She had never seen how Xiang Kaiping and Su Qingsang got along. She had never asked before, so she didn't know. Now she knew. In the video, she saw Su Qingsang learning how to wrap rice dumplings with a smile. She saw Xiang Kaiping standing behind her, teaching her bit by bit. Su Qingsang studied very seriously, occasionally raising her head to look at Xiang Kaiping. She looked at Xiang Kaiping with affection in her eyes. Xiang Kaiping looked at Su Qingsang in the same way. She had feelings for Xiang Kaiping. That was what Li Qianxue could tolerate the least. Li Qianxue's emotions fluctuated violently, and a kind of fear that was similar to losing enveloped her. She thought of Su Qinghui again. Su Qinghui had been thinking about Xiang Kaiping for decades. That woman was like a nightmare to Li Qianxue. She had been in Su Qinghui's mind for so many years. Was he going to take away Su Qingsang's feelings as well? Another thing was that when she came to Rong City, she ran into Su Qinghui on the plane. Qianxue. When Su Qinghui saw her, his face was full of surprise. In the first-class cabin, the two of them were only separated by an aisle. She glanced at Su Qinghui coldly at that time and then looked away. She still hated Su Qinghui, so she naturally didn't want to look at him anymore. However, Su Qinghui seemed to be very interested in talking to her. Qianxue, are you also going to Rong City? Li Qianxue didn't answer his question. A hint of disappointment flashed across Su Qinghui's face, but it was only for a moment. What a coincidence, I'm also going to Rong City, Su Qinghui. Li Qianxue interrupted him, feeling that the deliberate expression on his face was ironic. This flight was originally to Rong City. Don't tell me you don't know. Su Qinghui was speechless. He wanted to say something, but Li Qianxue didn't give him a chance at all. I know you're going to Rong City to see Xiang Kaiping, so you don't have to say anything now. Qianxue, I'm not going to see Kaiping. I'm going to discuss business. Really? Su Qinghui thought that the company had begun to improve recently. The rise in his career had given him some confidence. He felt that this had brought him one step closer to Li Qianxue. Business? Li Qianxue smiled. Yes. Yes, you're going all the way to Rong City to discuss business. I understand. You don't have to explain. Li Qianxue's smile was sarcastic, and there was even a hint of disdain in her eyes. He said that he wanted to get back together with her, but at the same time, he was hooking up with Xiang Kaiping. TSK, this Su Qinghui really had no bottom line. Qianxue. Believe me, stop. Li Qianxue felt uncomfortable. Her eyes suddenly became sharp. I'm already divorced from you. Go wherever you like, see whoever you want to see, it has nothing to do with me. Okay. Li Qianxue's reaction was to take out a blindfold and put it on, completely ignoring Su Qinghui. Su Qinghui still wanted to speak, but someone behind him boarded the plane, so he swallowed what he wanted to say. When he got off the plane, Li Qianxue went to the bathroom, completely avoiding him. When Li Qianxue divorced Su Qinghui, she knew that Su Qinghui would definitely be with Xiang Kaiping in the end. The woman he loved for so many years suddenly came back one day. How could there be no fluctuations? As for what Su Qinghui said, she believed that it was only because of the Li family, or because of the Li group. Now that Su Qinghui appeared in Rong City, it completely proved that her guess was correct. Su Qinghui didn't love her. He wanted to be with Xiang Kaiping. Li Qianxue didn't want to say anything. They were already divorced, and the two of them had no relationship. Even if Su Qinghui really married Xiang Kaiping and got together in the end, it had nothing to do with her. But Su Qingsang couldn't. For so many years, Xiang Kaiping stood between her and Su Qinghui, receiving Su Qinghui's unforgettable love for decades. Now, even her own daughter was going to be taken away? Was that so? As soon as Li Qianxue thought about it, she felt uncomfortable all over. How could she allow such a thing to happen? How could she allow even Su Qingsang to fall for Xiang Kaiping? What about in the end? Would even Su Yusen fall for Xiang Kaiping as well? In the future, Su Qinghui could still follow Xiang Kaiping and form a new family. In this family, there was a father and a mother. There were also 3 children. Was that so? Li Qianxue had never been a pessimist. But when it came to Su Qinghui, she had never been optimistic. She hugged Su Qingsang tightly, as if she was hugging a piece of driftwood. It wasn't easy for her to find her daughter. Was she going to lose her again? Mom? Li Qianxue wasn't very strong, but now Su Qingsang really felt like she was suffocating from being strangled by her. Mom? You. Qingsang, don't leave me, okay? Mom? Qingsang, you can't leave me, okay? The two questions in a row made Su Qingsang a little confused. Her lips moved, and she raised her hand and gently patted Li Qianxue's back. Mom, what are you talking about? I'm your daughter. How can I not want you? No, you have to promise me. You have to promise me first. You can't not want me, you can't not want me. Okay? Su Qingsang could feel the curious gazes of the passers-by around them. It was already past the Dragon Boat Festival, but the sky was still dark. What's more, it was almost lunchtime. Many family members of patients were coming to visit. Mom, can you let me go first? No, you have to promise me first, and then I'll let you go. The huge feeling of losing her made it difficult for Li Qianxue to let go. Su Qingsang could only respond. Okay, I promise you. I won't leave you. And I won't leave you. Really? Li Qianxue finally retreated a little, but her eyes were still fixed on Su Qingsang's face. Of course it's true. Su Qingsang didn't understand why Li Qianxue would say such a thing, but she had been with Li Qianxue for the past few months and understood some of her personality. Mom. You're my mom. I'm your daughter. How can I not want you? They were related by blood, the closest mother and daughter in the world. Li Qianxue looked at her, wanting to say something but hesitating. But what? Mom, what's wrong with you? It's nothing. Li Qianxue also saw the people coming and going on both sides, and the gazes that fell on them from time to time. She curled her lips and restrained all her emotions. In a few seconds, she had already cleaned up the expression on her face. Look at me, I'm dizzy from the flight. Have you eaten? No. I'm planning to go home. Mom, you haven't eaten either, have you? No. The plain food isn't delicious. Then let's go home. Ms. Yu's cooking is good. Okay. I've heard you mention it many times. Let's go. Li Qianxue took a step back, and Su Qingsang only saw a suitcase behind her. It was also at this moment that she realized that Li Qianxue probably got off the plane and came over without even putting down her luggage. She couldn't tell what she was feeling. This wasn't a good place to talk. She pulled the luggage over. Mom. Let's go. When Li Qianxue stood in front of Su Qingsang's car, she couldn't tell that she had lost her composure just now. She had returned to the calm and elegant young lady of the Li family. Qingsang. How have you been? Mom, don't you video call me every day? Why are you asking this? It's pretty good. I go to work and get off work every day. You know about my relationship with Hu Jinyao. It's pretty good anyway. I know, I wanted to ask you, had you seen Xiang in the recent period? What? Su Qingsang put the luggage away and closed the trunk. It was such a coincidence that she ran into Su Qinghui. How many times did he come every month? What was his purpose? He was probably looking for Xiang Kaiping. No, maybe there was Su Peijian as well. Thinking of Su Peijian, Li Qianxue's face darkened even more. The daughter she had raised for more than 20 years was no longer her daughter. Not only did she refuse to acknowledge her, she even, Mom? Mom? Su Qingsang's words brought Li Qianxue back to her senses. She realized that they had already gotten out of the elevator. Su Qingsang opened the door and let Li Qianxue in. She carried Li Qianxue's luggage to the guest room. The last time Li Qianxue came, she hadn't had a chance to tour the place. This time, she wasn't in the mood to tour. She sat on the sofa. Su Qingsang came out and went to the kitchen to ask Ms. Yu to add 2 more dishes. She brought a glass of juice for Li Qianxue and sat down next to her. "Mom, did you meet my dad?" She had asked just now, but Li Qianxue didn't answer. Yes. Li Qianxue didn't want to talk about Su Chenghui. She really hated that man now. Dad, Su Qingsang thought of the idea she had given Su Chenghui before. She had asked Su Chenghui to try his best to win Li Qianxue back. Now it seemed that she had made a mistake. "I don't want to talk about your dad." Li Qianxue's attitude was too resistant, so Su Qingsang could only swallow the words that were about to come out of her mouth. Hua Jinyao returned home at night and was a little surprised to see Li Qianxue. He didn't understand why his mother-in-law came to Rong City all of a sudden. After greeting her, he glanced at Su Qingsang, and Su Qingsang shook her head gently at him. In fact, she didn't know why Li Qianxue came to Rong City. But she could roughly guess that she was provoked by Su Chenghui. How did Su Chenghui provoke Li Qianxue? Su Qingsang didn't get an answer to this question even after dinner. "Mom." Su Qingsang made the bed and looked at Li Qianxue. "The quilt is sun-dried. The bed is ready. You must be tired today. Why don't you rest first? Qingsang, come here. I want to talk to you." Su Qingsang walked to Li Qianxue and sat down next to her. Li Qianxue pulled her hand over and held it. "Qingsang. You really haven't seen your dad?" "I really haven't." Su Qingsang shook her head. "Dad is in Lin City, and I'm in Rong City. How could I have the chance to see him?" "That's true." Li Qianxue nodded. "You're not the child he likes the most. If he came to Rong City, why would he come to see you?" "Dad came to Rong City?" Su Qingsang's eyes widened. "Why didn't I know?" "Of course you wouldn't know. He didn't come to Rong City to see you. He came to see someone else." "You mean Su Peizhen?" Su Qingsang originally wanted to say Xiang Kaiping, but she was afraid that Li Qianxue would be unhappy, so she quickly changed her words. Li Qianxue, however, understood what she was going to say. Her expression was slightly gloomy. Su Qingsang didn't notice the change in Li Qianxue's expression. She thought of something else. Last time, during the Dragon Boat Festival, Hua Yifan brought Su Peizhen to the Hua family. Did Hua Yifan really want to marry Su Peizhen? So this time, Su Chenghui came to Rong City because their parents wanted to meet? However, when she went to see Xiang Kaiping 2 days ago, she didn't hear her talk about this. Yes, Xiang Kaiping was afraid that she would be unhappy, so she never mentioned Su Peizhen in front of her. It shouldn't be just to see Su Peizhen. Li Qianxue looked at Su Qingsang's expression and knew that she wasn't lying. That meant that she had never seen Su Chenghui. But what about Xiang Kaiping? She must have seen her, right? And Su Peizhen? Su Qingsang didn't know how to answer. After all, Su Chenghui was her father. Have you seen Su Peizhen? Li Qianxue had very complicated feelings about her former adopted daughter. She didn't only suspect Su Chenghui, but also Su Peizhen. Yes. Meeting Li Qianxue's penetrating gaze, Su Qingsang didn't lie. Not only have I seen her, but I'm afraid that soon, we will become a family again. What do you mean? Li Qianxue's heart skipped a beat. Su Qingsang didn't want to say this to Li Qianxue. However, if Su Chenghui came to Rong City to set up the marriage between Su Peizhen and Hua Yifan, then Li Qianxue would find out sooner or later. I saw Peizhen at the Hua family. She briefly told Li Qianxue about Su Peizhen and Hua Yifan's relationship. When Su Qingsang finished, she met Li Qianxue's sharp gaze and felt inexplicably guilty. Before the Dragon Boat Festival? Why didn't you tell me? Li Qianxue's expression suddenly became a little strange. She could understand Su Qingsang's concerns, but because of that, she felt even more depressed. In Su Qingsang's heart, would she side with Su Peijian? Mom, don't be angry. I just don't want you to worry. What's more, Peijian is a grown-up. I think she knows what she's doing. In fact, Su Qingsang wasn't stupid. Su Peijian wanted to marry into the Hua family, even if she didn't want to do anything to Su Qingsang. Su Peijian was Li Qianshue's adopted daughter, and Su Qingsang was Li Qianshue's biological daughter. If possible, Su Qingsang didn't want to be on the opposite side of Su Peijian. Knows what she's doing? Li Qianshue sneered, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. It would be great if she really knows what she's doing. Su Qingsang looked at Li Qianshue, not quite understanding what she meant. Forget it. Let's not talk about her. Li Qianshue finally understood why Su Qinghui was in Rong City. It turned out that Su Peijian was going to marry Hua Yifan, another grandson of the Hua family. Li Qianshue had seen Hua Yifan at the Hua family before. He was young and seemed to have a shrewd and astute mind. Su Peijian didn't like Qiu Yanba very much in the past, but Qiu Yanba had a good character. But Hua Yifan was far worse than Hua Jinyao. Why was Su Peijian with him? Mom, you should rest early. Okay. Li Qianshue didn't want to think about these things now, but, Qingsang, don't hide anything from me in the future. Mom, I didn't. Really? Then why didn't you tell me about Peijian this time? Qingsang, did you think that if Peijian had a conflict with you, I would be on Peijian's side? I didn't mean that. Su Qingsang shook her head. No matter how she thought about it, she believed that Li Qianshue wouldn't be on Su Peijian's side. I just thought that you raised her for more than 20 years. If possible, I don't want to make things difficult for you. Li Qianshue's heart suddenly ached. She hugged Su Qingsang tightly and forcefully. Was that what Su Qingsang thought? Didn't want to make things difficult for her? Then how many more things could she hide in order not to make things difficult for herself? I'm not making things difficult for you. Li Qianshue hugged Su Qingsang and looked at an unknown point. There's nothing difficult for me. Nothing at all. She suddenly let go of her arms, stepped back a little, and looked at Su Qingsang. Qingsang, you have to believe one thing. No matter what happens, I will be on your side. Always. Her overly serious face shocked Su Qingsang greatly. Finally, she nodded her head heavily. Okay. I understand. Not only do you need to know, but you also need to believe it. Li Qianshue held Su Qingsang's hand tightly. Qingsang, I know what you're thinking, but I'm telling you, from now on, get rid of those thoughts. I'm your mother, your biological mother. I won't stand against you for anyone. Do you understand? Su Qingsang's throat was a little choked. She could only nod heavily, but couldn't say a word. But Qingsang, I want you to promise me something. What? If there's anything I don't do well, you have to tell me. But it's the same for you. You can never give up on Mom or abandon me. Mom. Su Qingsang understood that she might have been affected by Su Qinghui. Mom, don't worry. I promised you just now. I won't. Look at me. You talk too much when you're old. I'm not old. Su Qingsang smiled and said, people will believe that you and I are sisters. How can you say that I'm old? You. Li Qianshue smiled, and her face finally looked a little relaxed. Okay. Go and rest. If I keep talking to you, I'm afraid Hua Jinyao will be jealous. Li Qianshue said half jokingly and half seriously. Mom, Su Qingsang blushed. She looked a little embarrassed. After she left, the relaxed expression on Li Qianshue's face disappeared, and was replaced by a serious expression. Su Qinghui, Su Peijian, and Xiang Kaiping. No matter what they wanted to do or what they planned to do, she was not afraid. The only thing she cared about, and the only bottom line, was her pair of children. Li Qianxue suddenly thought of something. She had been told that Su Peijian was going to marry Hui Yifan. What did Su Peijian want to do? Do you think I did something wrong? Su Qingsang looked at Hu Jinmiao with uncertainty in her eyes. She had just returned to the room and told Hu Jinmiao about Li Qianxue's loss of composure and her deduction. She didn't know that Li Qianxue had seen the video of her and Xiang Kaiping together. She attributed it to Su Chenghui probably doing something. And why did Su Chenghui do those things? A large part of the reason might be because of her encouragement and instigation. But now, she wasn't sure if her encouragement and incitement had been a mistake. I looked at my father at the time and felt really pitiful. That's why I said those things. But today, my mother has no intention of forgiving my father at all. Not only did she not have any intention of forgiving him, but it seemed that she hated him even more. I think that my father might not come to Rong City to see Auntie as my mother said. It's very likely that Su Peijian might really be marrying Hui Yifan. But my mother doesn't seem to think so. Li Qianxue obviously misunderstood and thought that Su Chenghui came to see Xiang Kaiping. Su Peijian and Hui Yifan were already talking about marriage? Why hadn't he heard about it? Hui Yifan would definitely discuss such a big matter with old Master Hu first. But Hui Yifan didn't get any news at all. Jinmiao? It has nothing to do with you. Hu Jinmiao looked at Su Qingsang and put aside his own thoughts. If your father really wants to get your mother back, I think he will do it whether you encourage him or not. But if your father doesn't want to, even if you encourage him, he won't be moved. But I don't think he came to Rong City because Su Peijian is going to marry Hui Yifan. Is it really because of Auntie? Could it be that after the past few months, Su Chenghui still thought that the person he loved was Xiang Kaiping? If that was the case, no wonder Li Qianxue was unhappy. No. Hu Jinmiao shook his head. He didn't think that was the case. Don't think too much. I think your mother might be thinking too much. Maybe your father doesn't have that kind of intention at all. Why not rule out both possibilities? Maybe he should ask Yang Wenchang tomorrow to find out if Su Chenghui came to Rong City to see Xiang Kaiping. Seeing Su Qingsang's serious expression, he rubbed the top of her head. All right. Don't frown. Maybe nothing happened. You're just thinking too much. Maybe your mother is going through menopause. You're the one going through menopause. Su Qingsang glared at him. Because of what he said, the worry in her heart dissipated a lot. Even if Li Qianxue and Su Chenghui could never be together, she still hoped that Li Qianxue and Su Chenghui could live separately. She didn't want them to be like enemies. Su Peijian didn't expect Li Qianxue to come to her. When she saw the elegant and beautiful Li Qianxue sitting in front of her, she was dazed for a moment. Half a year ago, she and Li Qianxue were a pair of close mother and daughter. They talked about everything and had deep feelings for each other. She still remembered how shy she was when she had her first menarche. She also remembered how Li Qianxue told her that it was the first step for a girl to grow up and that she should be happy. She also remembered how surprised she was when she received a love letter from a boy for the first time. Li Qianxue told her that it was something to be proud of. Li Qianxue was a very good mother. In the past 20 years, she had given Su Peijian the most selfless and deep motherly love. However, in just half a year, the two people who used to be mother and daughter were sitting across a table from each other. There was not a trace of a smile on each other's faces. Su Peijian swallowed the word mother that was on the tip of her tongue. She closed her eyes. This woman was no longer her mother. She was Su Qingsang's mother now. This realization made Su Peijian feel bad. When she opened her eyes again, her expression was indifferent. Li Qianxue had been looking at her, and that gaze made her feel a little uncomfortable. Auntie, do you need me for something? Su Peijian pretended to speak carelessly, but her face was deliberately cold. That auntie had clearly divided the relationship between the two of them. Even though Li Qianxue had known for a long time that Su Peijian was no longer her daughter, when she suddenly heard the word auntie, her heart did sting a little. If someone had told Li Qianxue half a year ago that one day, she and Su Peijian would become strangers, she would have thought that person was crazy. However, in the past 6 months, she and Su Peijian had indeed become the most familiar strangers. Why do you think I'm looking for you? Li Qianxue gently leaned against the back of the chair. Her eyes never left Su Peijian's face. How would I know? Su Peijian's expression did not change. She looked at an unknown point, but she did not look at Li Qianxue. You don't know? Weren't you the one who lured me to Rome City? Every time Su Peijian lied in front of her, she did not dare to look at her. Titles and relationships could be changed, but some small habits couldn't be changed in a day or two. Auntie, what are you talking about? I don't quite understand. You don't understand? Li Qianxue sneered. Her eyes were sharp like knives. You sent me the video, right? Didn't you send me the video to lure me to Rome City? What video? I don't know what you are talking about. Su Peijian did not look at Li Qianxue. Not many people know about my private email. Only a few people know about it. You happen to be one of them. Li Qianxue's body leaned forward slightly, and her eyes looked straight into Su Peijian's heart. Check the ID and address of that letter. It is from Rome City. If I'm not wrong, should be able to find out where you live by following that address. Peijian, do you still want to deny it at this time? Su Peijian's expression changed slightly. She finally met Li Qianxue's eyes. I sent the video, but auntie, are you here to denounce me? Denounce me? Li Qianxue looked at Su Peijian. You used the wrong word. I am not here to denounce you today. Meeting Su Peijian's puzzled gaze, Li Qianxue's voice became more serious than before. I am here today to warn you. Warn? Su Peijian. I want to explain something to you. Li Qianxue's expression was serious, and her tone was cold. The Li family does not owe you anything. Whether it is me, Yusen, or even my father. We do not owe you anything. In the past, you occupied the position of the eldest daughter of the Su family, and enjoyed all our love, protection, and care. That is all. The Li family only has gratitude for you, and we do not owe you anything. Do you admit it? Su Peijian did not speak. She did not want to answer this question. You feel lost, you feel that you have been hurt, but that is because you are not used to your current identity. You still think of yourself as the eldest daughter of the Su family. You feel that we owe you, don't you? Silence. Su Peijian's lips were pressed into a straight line. The person who swapped the child was Su Qinghui, and the person who made you fall from heaven to hell was also Su Qinghui. Whether it's me or your grandfather, the feelings we had for you were real. If you really think that we need to take responsibility for the feelings that you have now lost your identity, you should look for Su Qinghui, not me. And you should not look for Qing Sang. When Li Qianxue said this, her voice rose a notch. You know that Qing Sang is the innocent person. She has suffered what she should not have. She has lost what she can never get back, nor can she make up for. Don't deny it. You and I know that her life as an illegitimate daughter for more than 20 years was not good. So I think I need to make it clear to you. If you have anger and resentment in your heart, you should look for the person you really hate. For example, your father, Su Qinghui. For example, the mother who brought you into this world, but never took responsibility, Xiang Kaiping. And the last thing you should do is look for Su Qingsang and let her bear the resentment in your heart. Su Peijian's expression sank bit by bit when Li Qianxue said those words. Chapter 582. Su Peijian felt a throbbing pain in her heart. The pain was worse than when she found out that she wasn't Li Qianxue's daughter. It was worse than when she was forced to leave the Li family. She looked at Li Qianxue. In the suppressed emotions in her eyes, the most obvious was the pain in her eyes. Li Qianxue saw it, but she didn't think she did anything wrong. Everyone had their choices. She felt sorry for Su Qingsang. She chose Su Qingsang, so she wouldn't let Su Peijian do anything to Su Qingsang. She wouldn't let Su Peijian hurt Su Qingsang. Although her words were cold-blooded, they were not unreasonable. Su Peijian could hate Su Qinghui, Xiang Kaiping, and even her. But Su Peijian had no reason to hate Su Qingsang. To put it bluntly, Su Peijian stole Su Qingsang's 20 years of life as the eldest daughter of the Su family. Su Qingsang had no obligation or responsibility to bear Su Peijian's unreasonable hatred and anger. Su Peijian felt that her emotions were tumbling. She looked at Li Qianxue and tried hard not to lose control. But it was difficult, really difficult. So, Auntie, do you think that I sent you that video to deal with Su Qingsang? Because she was too emotional, her voice was a little shaky. Isn't it? Li Qianxue sneered. Su Peijian had been her daughter for so many years. Even if she didn't understand her 100%, she knew at least 70% to 80%. What did Su Peijian mean? She knew it very well. When she saw the video for the first time, it wasn't difficult for her to guess that it was sent by Su Peijian after thinking about it calmly. After all, Xiang Kaiping was Su Peijian's biological mother now. It was said that the two of them had been living together for a long time. It wasn't surprising that Su Peijian had the opportunity to install a camera in her home. It wasn't surprising that she would take pictures of Su Qingsang and Xiang Kaiping together. But she had a very purpose for sending such a video to her. Li Qianxue had been mother and daughter with Su Peijian for many years. She could guess without guessing that her purpose was to drive a wedge between her and Su Qingsang. Do you think I'll be angry after seeing the video? Will I be unhappy? She was indeed angry, and she was indeed unhappy. After being unhappy and angry, after calming down, there was also fear and dread. Fear that I might lose it. However, in front of Su Peijian, Li Qianxue would not reveal any of these emotions. Su Peijian, do you think I'll be in a hurry to get even with Su Qingsang after watching the video? Do you really think that I would do something irrational with my personality, that I can't tolerate anything? Didn't you spend so much effort just to drive a wedge between us, mother and daughter? Do you think I'll do as you wish? Su Peijian, who had been Li Qianxue's daughter for more than 20 years, really understood her. He had clearly guessed her character. If it weren't for Li Qianxue's strong self-control and the competitive spirit in her heart, she probably wouldn't be so imposing right now. Su Peijian smiled. You won't let me have my way. So, you specifically came to me and warned me not to hurt your precious daughter? Yes. Li Qianxue nodded. Her voice was resolute. Do you think I don't know what you're doing behind my back? Do you think I don't know what you want to do? Peijian. Just as you understand me, I understand you. You lost everything that the Li family gave you and your identity as the eldest daughter of the Su family. For you, it's extremely difficult to bear. And now, the person who got everything that used to be yours has become Su Qingsang, whom you used to despise the most. What do you think? Do I need to say more? Facing Li Qianxue's questioning expression, Su Peijian nodded. So? You think I can't bear it, so you think that I'll deal with Su Qingsang? Isn't that right? Li Qianxue was not polite. If you don't have that kind of intention, why did you send me that video? If you don't have that kind of intention, why did you try so hard to get close to Hui Yifan? Don't tell me that you don't know the relationship between Hui Yifan and Hu Jinyao. You clearly know it. You know, and you're sure. That's why you're with Hui Yifan. You want to marry into the Hua family, right? Su Peijian used to think that after so many things that she had been through, her heart was already cold. But now she knew that her heart was not completely dead. She wasn't completely cold. She still missed everything about the Su family, and she still couldn't let go of everything about the Li family. When Li Qianxue faced Su Peijian with such an attitude, she only had one feeling. Thousands of arrows pierced through her heart. Auntie, in your heart, do you feel that? When I lost my identity as the eldest daughter of the Su family, when I lost my backing in the Lee family. Just because I'm a person, don't I have the right to live a good life? This was Su Peijian's office. She was not afraid of being seen. She stood up abruptly and stared fiercely at Li Qinshue's face. Tell me. When I lost my backing in the Li family and lost my identity as the eldest daughter of the Su family, did I not have the right to marry into a rich family? Did I not have the right to be happy? Is that right? I didn't mean that. No matter what, she was the daughter that she had raised for decades. Li Qinsue didn't want to say too much. But you know why you're with Hui Yifan. I know what I'm doing. Su Peijian smiled sarcastically. Her eyes were full of self-mockery. Mom. A few months later, Su Peijian suddenly called out. Li Qinshue's body trembled. She lowered her eyes and didn't look at Su Peijian. Mom. Su Peijian called again. She looked at Li Qinshue's slightly pale face. I've called you Mom for more than 20 years. Now in your heart, I'm not even as important as one of Su Qingsang's fingers, am I? Am I? So when you heard that I'm with Hui Yifan, you couldn't sit still, right? You're afraid that I'll go against your precious daughter, right? Li Qinsue forced herself not to be swayed by Su Peijian's words. After all, she was a few years older than Su Peijian. She reacted quickly. So, you want to tell me that you and Hui Yifan have feelings for each other? Can't I? Su Peijian looked at Li Qinsue with a face full of accusation. In your heart, is there no one who wants the daughter that you've raised so carefully? Can't she have her own love, her own feelings, and her own future? Even if I'm with Hui Yifan and have the slightest intention of going against Su Qingsang. So what? That's a heinous crime? That's unforgivable? Su Qingsang can marry into the Hua family, but I can't. That's what you mean. Is it? I didn't say that. If you really want to be with Hui Yifan, of course, I have no right to say anything. I just want to tell you that my attitude is. Your attitude is that you suspect the purpose of everything I do. Your attitude is that you think that I, the daughter that you've raised for more than 20 years, do everything with the greatest malice? What else? Li Qinsue looked up at Su Peijian, her gaze indifferent. How do you explain your motive for sending me the video? Motive? That's because I want you to see Su Qingsang's true colors clearly. Su Peijian propped her hands on the desk and looked down at Li Qinsue. What do you think she means? She reunites with you as mother and daughter while following me and being as close as mother and daughter to my mother? Why can't I expose her when she's trying to curry favor with both sides? Li Qinsue thought of the scene where Su Qingsang and Xiang Kaiping were as close as mother and daughter. She thought of Su Qingsang's sweet smile in front of Xiang Kaiping. Her heart was indeed filled with waves of discomfort. But now, seeing Su Peijian like this, she felt even more uncomfortable. She sneered, stood up, and looked at Su Peijian. Are you sure you want to expose her? Don't you want to see me hate her? And then distance myself from her? Su Peijian, you're thinking too much. Don't you know? Su Peijian thought that she knew Li Qinsue very well. She didn't believe that she could really remain indifferent after watching that video. I won't. Li Qinsue stood up straight, as if to testify for her. Peijian, you don't seem to understand that Su Qingsang is different from you. I was indeed a little unhappy when she went to see Xiang Kaiping. But when I calmed down, I felt touched. You can't not know that before Su Qingsang acknowledged me, she treated Xiang Kaiping as her own mother. Once in Japan, Xiang Kaiping even had a conflict with you because of Su Qingsang. Right? Xiang Kaiping had given her heart to Su Qingsang. If she had given her heart to Su Qingsang could have ignored it. In the future, she would have been estranged from her. Then, with such a daughter, should I also worry that one day, she would become estranged from me because of someone else? You won't understand. It's because I saw the video you posted that my heart ached for Su Qingsang even more. Because after she acknowledged me, she still didn't forget Xiang Kaiping, which shows that she values relationships. I only feel proud of such a daughter, but I won't feel the slightest distance or even disgust. I think that you, Peijian, will never understand this kind of feeling. Su Peijian's face turned pale. She stood there with a slightly gloomy expression. You actually think that way? Li Qianxue nodded and added, yes, I am. That's what I think. And you, my former daughter, I still want to warn you. No matter how high-sounding you are, you can't hide the darkness in your heart. Peijian. I'll say it again, and it will still be the same. In the future, I don't want to interfere with who you want to be with, what kind of life you want to live, or what kind of family you want to integrate into. There's only one thing, and that's Qingsang and Yusen. They are my bottom line. I hope you understand. They are your bottom line? What about me? What about me? Su Peijian slammed the table hard. It was rare for her to lose control of her emotions. It was already extremely rare for her to be like this. Do we have to be like this between us? Mom. I call you Mom. In my heart, you are my mother. Su Peijian couldn't bear the pain. She couldn't control her emotions anymore, and she didn't want to. Mom, if you protect Su Qingsang like this, then what am I? How long has it been since you acknowledged Su Qingsang? 5 months? 6 months? What about me? I called you Mom for 25 years. Mom, is this how you're treating me now? Is this how you're going to trample on me and hurt me for a daughter you've only acknowledged for a few days? Is that right? 25 years can't compare to Su Qingsang's 5 months, right? Whether it's you or my mom, do you all think she's better now? I'm also your daughter. Su Peijian lost control, and her voice was almost roaring. I, Su Peijian, am also your daughter, the daughter you raised for 25 years, and I called you Mom for 25 years. Why are you doing this to me? Why? Su Peijian walked out from behind the desk and walked toward Li Qianxue step by step. Mom. You're my mother. I've always treated you as my mother, and I still can't accept Xiang Kaiping. Do you know why? Because in my heart, only you are my mother. I only acknowledge you as my mother. With every step she took, she would ask a question. With every step she took, she would ask a question. Finally, she stood in front of Li Qianxue. Her eyes were resentful, and her face was full of unwillingness. I respect you and love you, even though I know that you're no longer my mother. But I still have hope for you. I thought that one day you would understand that love is not based on blood, but on getting along. I thought that you were just angry at that time. You just hated my dad for swapping my identity with Su Qingsang. When you think it through, you will accept me again. Acknowledge me as your daughter again? But Mom, what are you doing to me now? Mom, what are you saying now? Huh? If your daughter is Su Qingsang, then what am I? What am I? She repeated the question again and again. This is your choice. A complicated look flashed across Li Qianxue's eyes, but only for a moment. I didn't chase you away at that time. I even agreed to let you stay in the Li family. You chose to give it up. Didn't you? You left the Li family of your own accord, and you left with Xiang Kaiping of your own accord. You cut off all ties with the Li family of your own accord. Li Qianxue was referring to the fact that ever since Su Peijian left the Li family, she hadn't called the Li family or sent Li Qianxue any news. She had separated herself from the Li family a long time ago, and now she was blaming her for giving up on her. She had never given up on her. She had also given Su Peijian some leeway, but she didn't want it. Then what do you want me to do? Huh? Do you want me to watch Su Qingsang surpass me? She's kind and gentle. She wouldn't do something like surpassing you. Li Qianxue subconsciously defended Su Qingsang. Su Peijian felt so angry that she wanted to vomit blood. She wouldn't. Heh. Why wouldn't she? Mom, in your heart, Su Qingsang is a good person. I am a bad person. But what are you doing now? All I did was send a video, and you rushed over to help her vent her anger. How can this be called kindness? She doesn't know that I came to you. She doesn't know? Yes. Even when she doesn't know, she can make you think for her like this. She can make you think for her so wholeheartedly. If she knew, do you think there would be a place for me, Su Peijian, in the Li family, in the Su family? Would there be? Li Qianxue frowned because of Su Peijian's attitude. That's because I know that your mind has changed. She would send that video to her, show such an expression in front of her, and reveal such thoughts. This daughter was no longer the daughter she used to be. I've changed because you guys have changed. You guys changed first. Su Peijian's eyes were red. She tried hard not to cry out. She suddenly stepped forward and looked at Li Qianxue. Mom, I still call you Mom. I'll ask you this once. Me. Can I go back to the Su family now? Are you willing to let me go back to the Su family? I never said that I won't let you stay in the Su family. You can still stay in the Su family. What about Su Qingsang? Is she going to stay too? This question is meaningless. You know very well that she won't pose any threat to you. It's true that she won't pose any threat to me, but she will take everything away from me. Su Peijian put her hands on Li Qianxue's shoulders. She took you away, Yusen away, and Grandpa away. Even her father was snatched away by her. Mom, what I want is very simple. I just want everything to be the same as before. We are still mother and daughter. Yusen is still my brother, and Grandpa is still my grandfather. Why can't we? Why? Mom. I beg you, let us go back to the past, okay? Let us be happy mother and daughter like we used to be, won't you? I promise, as long as you don't let Su Qingsang go back to the Su family, I won't do anything. I can even not marry Hui Yifan. Okay? There were tears in the corners of her eyes, but she stubbornly did not let them fall. For Su Peijian, money and status had become secondary in her heart. She couldn't stand it. She couldn't accept it. It was her family. She thought they were her family, but in the end, they abandoned her. Her eyes were red, and her face was full of hope and desire. She looked at her like this, just like when she was a child. Li Qianxue suddenly turned her face away, not daring to meet Su Peijian's gaze. Impossible. I agree to let you stay at home, but Qingsang will always be a part of the Su family. She will always be your sister. The hope on Su Peijian's face disappeared. She withdrew her hand and took a step back. So. Mom, in the end, you still decided to give up on me, right? You can coexist, but you don't want it. Yes. I don't want it. But why should I want it? Su Peijian gritted her teeth and looked at Li Qianxue. You were the one who said it. You said I was the eldest daughter of the Su family. You said I was your little princess. You said I could want anything in this world that you could give me. Do you remember? Mom? On my 17th birthday, you gave me a custom-made sports car. You said that everything I own is unique. If that's the case, why can't I want that unique motherly love? Why? Li Qianxue couldn't answer Su Peijian's question. Times had changed. At that time, she really doted on Su Peijian and really treated her as her little princess. Don't blame me. If you want to blame someone, blame your father. Su Peijian suddenly laughed, her face full of self-mockery. Blame my father? I think I should blame myself. I'm too stupid. I took what you said to coax me seriously. You were just coaxing a child. You said it casually, but I took it seriously. Mom. I just want to continue to be your daughter. Do you have to be so cruel to me? I told you, the person who is cruel to you is not me, it's your father. It's your father who caused all of this pain. It's not me. Li Qianxue felt a little suffocated as she said this. She didn't want to stay any longer. Although Su Peijian's words were sharp, they did affect her. After all, Su Peijian was the daughter she had raised. Faced with such questioning, Li Qianxue really didn't feel good. Peijian, we are mother and daughter. I don't want to mention what you did in the past, and I don't want to pursue it. But in the future, I will never give you a chance to hurt Qingsang again. I won't give you a chance at all. That's all I have to say. Behave yourself in the future. Su Peijian stood there, her body a little stiff and a little stupefied. She listened to Li Qianshue's warning and only felt that it was ironic. So, blood relations were so important? Li Qianxue didn't look at her anymore, turned around, and walked out the door. However, the moment she opened the door, she was completely stunned. This woman was Xiang Kaiping? Although she had seen Xiang Kaiping on the video. But Li Qianxue didn't expect that one day, she would meet Xiang Kaiping in this way. Their eyes met. The two women, who were nearly 100 years old together, didn't move. Su Peijian didn't notice Xiang Kaiping at first. After all, Xiang Kaiping was afraid that she would be unhappy, so she hadn't come to the office for a while. She was still standing there, still sad. Thinking of Li Qianshue's love and concern for Su Qingsang, she felt more and more pain. Pain. Look at Su Qingsang. She didn't need to do anything at all to let her easily taste frustration, disappointment, pain, and discomfort. In such a situation, what reason did she have to reconcile with Su Qingsang? How could she return to the Su family without a grudge in such a situation? Continue to be a family with Li Qianxue? No, she didn't want to. She only wished that she had never had a sister like Su Qingsang. She looked in the direction that Li Qianxue left and found that when she stood there without moving, she was a little secretly happy. She thought that Li Qianxue regretted it. However, she soon saw Xiang Kaiping standing face to face with Li Qianxue, motionless. Mom? This mom was very soft. Su Peijian suddenly felt a little guilty. Did Xiang Kaiping hear what she said to Li Qianxue just now? After hearing that, Mom, Xiang Kaiping looked over Li Qianshue's shoulder and swept in the direction of Su Peijian. Who are you calling? Li Qianxue didn't turn around. She was still standing at the door, looking at Xiang Kaiping. After so many years, it was the first time that she directly faced Xiang Kaiping like this. Compared to the Xiang Kaiping in the video, the Xiang Kaiping in front of her was completely like an ordinary middle-aged woman on the street. However, it was this woman who had no special characteristics at all, who was ordinary and unremarkable. But she had captured Su Qinghui's heart for more than 20 years. Li Qianxue closed her eyes. When she opened them again, she moved on the tips of her feet and wanted to leave. Xiang Kaiping, however, did not move. She stood in front of Li Qianxue and looked sharply in Su Peijian's direction. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.